actually didn't really believe in God in my early teen years. It was almost like believing in Santa Claus. Like, I don't know why, but like the idea of a good father was something I couldn't really wrap my head around. Made the idea of like a God that would love me just sound like the most unrealistic thing.
We're not vocal enough about there are very sharp Christian business leaders out there, and we don't know about them. And that's part of what we want to do at Wealthy Kingdom is start to highlight this, because like I hear people say like, man, Billy Graham said that there's going to be a great revival in the marketplace and we're waiting for it. And I'm like, what are you waiting for? It's happening. What's going on, Wealthy Kingdom? This is Chris. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wealthy Kingdom podcast. If you guys haven't caught all of our other podcasts, please make sure that you like, subscribe, do all that good stuff so that you are always getting updated on when we have new episodes dropping. Today's a good episode because I'm going to be interviewing and talking with someone. We go to church together. I've gotten to know this man over the last few years. He has a great family. I'm going to let him tell us more about what he's got going on. But honestly, this is going to be a good one. I'm super excited for this interview. And so let me introduce Tony Lopez. We're going to get right into it. So Tony, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, man. It's great to be here.
I'm happy that you responded. You were like, yeah, let's go.
Let's do it.
That's amazing. So Tony, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So born and raised here in Las Vegas. Originally my background growing up, really was, the goal was to go into full-time ministry.
Okay.
So, right out of high school, did an internship with my home church. At the time I was studying architecture and business because those were two passions of mine.
Okay.
But eventually I made a big kind of 180 and said, hey, I'm going to go all in and I'm going to go to Bible school. So packed my bags, moved to Southern California and ended up, going to Bible college.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. I'm an original Vegas kid.
Nice.
So when I hear that, I'm like, I moved here at some point. That's not an original. Like
right.
You grew up here. So what school did you go to?
I went to Green Valley.
Went to Green Valley. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're on the opposite side of town.
Okay. Where'd you go?
I was out. Okay. It's going to sound bad.
Yeah.
I went to 3 different high schools, but there's a reason. I wasn't a bad kid. I went to Shadow Ridge my first year.
Right on.
And then they built Arborview. So they changed all the zones.
Yeah.
So then I got bused to Arborview. And then I moved in with my dad. So the last 2 years, I ended up going to Bonanza.
Oh, right on.
So
okay, cool.
Yeah.
I guess I got to stay on the podcast. I'm going to ask you other questions. But no, that's awesome, man. Very
Cool. So you're a church kid.
Yeah. Well, kind of.
Kind of.
I didn't grow up in church.
Okay.
I grew up as like a Creaster. So
Okay.
Christmas and Easter.
Got you. Yeah.
And
2 big
grew
ones.
up, basically grew up Catholic. So would go to St. Thomas More
Okay.
and would go twice a year. And I actually didn't really believe in God in my early teen years. I kind of felt like it was almost like believing in Santa Claus. Like, I don't know why, but like the idea of a good father was something I couldn't really wrap my head around.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was told that like, hey, God is a good father, I think I have a great dad, but my dad maybe wasn't always present.
Okay.
And having not felt like much affection from him growing up, made the idea of like a God that would love me just sound like the most unrealistic thing. And so it wasn't until I was about 15 years old that my mom got radically saved, like
Okay.
total 180 experience. And she started dragging us to church. None of us wanted to go, especially every Sunday.
Good mom.
And
Good mom.
great mom. And so she dragged us to church. And probably after about a year of being drugged to church, it finally started to click to me. And I started to understand a lot more about who God is and ultimately started that relationship with him.
So walk me through that, because God is Santa Claus.
Yeah.
They're equal at this point. Mom
Yeah.
gets radically saved. So what are you thinking in that process of like, okay, mom really believes in Santa Claus now.
Yeah.
And we have to go along. And as a high school student, that's different.
It was. Yeah, it was definitely a big change. And, for that first year, it didn't really impact my life at all. Like in the sense of like my day-to-day life, like I would go to church and I don't know how present I was. I wasn't really checked in, just kind of going through the motion. And I think what honestly got my attention is at that same time in my life, I was really struggling. And I was going through other things that I can dive into as well.
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
brought
Wherever you want
me,
to go.
it brought me to like my knees, and it was ultimately like sexual purity stuff, like
Okay.
pornography and all of that. And it's 15 years old. You know, it started off like being something that was a funny thing me and my friends would do. It would be like a sleepover, and it's like, hey, lock the door. We're going to watch something on TV because he's got whatever, some kind of cable or whatever it is. You
Yeah.
get those channels, right?
Gotcha.
So this is back in the day before, phones had images or nothing like that, right?
Uh-huh.
So, but what started off as like something that felt kind of like innocent and funny and with the boys became something that was more than that. And I noticed when we would stop watching it and I'd go back home and it's Monday, I'm like, man, I still want to like view this kind of stuff.
Right.
And so I knew it was wrong, and I knew it wasn't helping me. Like I recognized like this feels destructive, and I feel like I can't stop. And so I remember being in a service where the youth pastor was talking on that topic, and I had never heard it talked about before ever. Like I don't know, like I didn't talk about it with other people, and I never heard an adult talk about it. And so at that point, when the youth pastor was kind of like talking about his own journey through that, I kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm desperate. Like I need help. And so, I responded to the altar call, and I would say at that point, like I connected God to the ability to get through this. And I think I almost turned to God, not because I thought he was such a good father and all of a sudden like all my beliefs changed, but more because you hear that quote, like typically God's address is at the end of your rope. And I feel like that's where I was at. I was at a rock bottom, and it was my only option. And so I was willing to take that leap and trust him because I felt like I had nowhere else to go.
Wow. And so just from there, then you're just, okay, church is it. This is my, I'm building a new foundation.
You're right.
At this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're in church now.
Yeah.
And you're growing up. Tell me about just you, like architecture, just where does how does that fit into everything?
Yeah. So it's funny, if you would have asked me even at as young as 5 years old what I wanted to be, I always said I wanted to be an architect, which is interesting. But like my dad has a landscape construction company, so I always grew up around construction and that type of environment.
Okay.
As a kid, like all day, every day, I'd be in the sandbox building stuff. Like my mom would be like, man, you were the easiest kid because you just play in the sandbox all day with your toys. Because I just loved creating. Like there was something about that and building that just I really enjoyed. And early on, even I can remember specifically in middle school and in high school, I'd have my notepad, but I'd have two halves to my notebook, right? The half where I'm taking notes on what the teacher's saying.
Right.
Then on the other half, I'm drawing houses. And I don't know why, but I just really enjoyed that type of craft, I guess, right? Like I loved trying to create homes, and I loved like there's a math side to it that you kind of got to make sure like spaces fit right and things flow and all of that. So
it's funny because I loved art growing up, and I had a really good friend who was great. Now mine wasn't houses. We were drawing like anime characters and superheroes and stuff. And he was always like a lot better than me. Like he had gone to school, he had done the shading and stuff. And I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to figure out, I'm trying to copy his stuff.
That seems hard. Yeah.
Man. And I really thought art was going to be my thing. They gave me the option to take CAD in high school. I was like, but there's math. It's not the kind of art that I'm trying to do. And for a small moment, I thought maybe like, okay, designing houses and like big skyscrapers and stuff, that seems pretty good. And then I got to that math part and I was like, oh no, this isn't
a little different.
This isn't it. So you start going in that direction.
Yeah.
Right? We're going architecture, and then like tell me about like how that starts to change for you.
So like even in high school, like senior year, I had already taken 3 years of architecture class. Half my schedule was architecture classes. That was fun. Like it was the easiest year ever. And eventually went to UNLV here in Vegas.
Okay.
My first year declared architecture as my major, took my architecture classes. And the thing that changed my mind from architecture was when I bought a book about architects, and I actually got to the chapter that was talking about kind of like salary, what you make as an architect and all these things.
Okay.
And up to that point, I had an idea of how much schooling was required to become an architect and understood like, man, this is kind of like being a doctor. Like there's a lot that goes into it in terms of your formal education and then internship hours and all of that afterwards.
Okay.
And when I looked at the pay, I was just like, man, that just did not seem to make sense to me. And who knows if that book was accurate, but in my head, it was accurate.
It was
and
accurate
so
enough. Yeah.
I pivoted that year. So at the end of my first year, I said, you know what? I'm going to go into business. And I don't really know where that's going to lead, but I love business too. So I'm going to go that direction. And so I did another year and a half of business. And you know, I don't even know what caused me to want to go to Bible college, except that I was really involved in my home church and really involved in the youth ministry, and God up to that point had really changed my life. Like I was 100% all in, and it felt like, man, the most important thing in life in my mind is my relationship with God and doing what God would want me to do. And so all of a sudden business didn't seem as appealing in that season. And I thought, man, I want to make as big a difference as I can for the kingdom. And I feel like in order to do that, it looks like being in ministry full time. And so from there, I basically made the shift, and there's different puzzle pieces that led to it, but ended up landing on a school in California and transferred there and ended up doing the Bible degree.
So let me ask you, because I hear that a lot in church.
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to make a difference for God, it's got to be ministry. Like that's got to be the thing. Like now I think it's evolving a little bit to where people are seeing like there's a lot more to do than just work at a church.
Right.
But was that just kind of influence on you just from just growing up in church, and that's just kind of how typically how we perceive that to be? Or, you know, do you think God was kind of leading you into that?
That's a good question. I'd say it was probably both. I felt like I definitely was feeling God's hand leading me in this direction. And it's funny because it does tie into what I shared earlier about me not understanding God as a good father. So the school I ended up deciding to go to was known for its apologetics, which is like the defense of the Christian faith.
Right.
And up until that point, I guess I skipped this part. At 19, I had a real big crisis of faith.
Okay.
I started to doubt a lot and not really think that this whole thing is true. And so I got super depressed, and it got dark. Like it was a season where I literally got even suicidal and was like afraid that like, man, maybe I'm going to take my life because I feel like life is meaningless. Like it was probably maybe the darkest season of my life. It wasn't a good season.
Wow.
And during that time, I was talking to one of my pastors at my home church, and he's like, you got to meet with this guy named Jason. He's like, Jason is someone that's really into apologetics, and I think he can help you out. He can help give you a different perspective that maybe you're not hearing here within our church. And so I met up with Jason, and that relationship turned into us meeting up every week. We'd meet up for 3 hours. We'd go to like a restaurant, hang out, catch up, talk, and ultimately talk apologetics. And that relationship still goes on to this day. It's 15 years since then.
That's great.
And for the first 5 years, we kind of met up like every week. And so he really invested in me a lot and really helped me understand, you know, why he believes what he believes. And that gave me some handlebars when it comes to Christianity, to not just feel it within my heart that Christianity is true, but also I'd say like know within my mind and have a level of understanding of why I believe what I believe.
Right.
And so we went to a conference. It was a Does God Exist debate between William Lane Craig, who's a big Christian philosopher, and Christopher Hitchens.
Okay.
And it was at the college, Biola University. And I remember going to that event, and I was like blown away. Like I'd never been to a Christian college. And to see like, wow, they're talking about stuff like this in this context was really attractive to me. And so I just was like, man, this is where I want to be. And so that was like the catalyst that led me to making the jump and saying, hey, I'm going to go to school here.
Got you. So you're saved, thrust into this world. You're running hard for God. And so kind of back me up a little bit, because you get to this point where you're like, okay, wait, was that more like for you? Was it just a kind of sounds like a coming of age thing where you're just like, okay, are my convictions really my convictions? You're in that stage of like school and college, and there's a lot happening in anybody's, I'm assuming like your early 20s when this is going on. So what's that like? Like, when you get to that point of like, is this even real? Is it you just show up in a church service one day and you just tilt your head and you're like, I don't know anymore.
It's interesting. So looking back, I think what happened is, from like 16 to 18, I'd say I based my faith a lot upon personal experiences.
Okay.
And I feel like I had a lot of valid personal experiences of God, of answers to prayer, of hearing testimonies of other believers, of cool things God had done in their life. And so I feel like it wasn't that it was like a bad thing to have my faith in, but my faith was so in that when I would run into an experience that seemed to contradict it, it led me to questioning a lot of things. And it, to be specific, it was an instance with one of my friends who was a Mormon and began to share a story of answered prayer. And I didn't even know what to think of that, because from my upbringing, it was like, dude, you believe something different. Why would you have an answer to prayer? But it seemed like a real answer to prayer. So I just didn't even have a framework to understand what that could be, or is it an answer? It was just enough to really rock my faith.
Gotcha.
And so I'd say my faith was built on like a pretty weak foundation up to that point, and then it got exposed,
Wow. So how long would you say you were in that season? Like
I would say like probably 2.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say like, it's kind of like you see it happen where someone is newly saved and they could be like 10 out of 10, like radical's kind of a good word for it, right? Like they're hardcore,
For sure. You're like,
I was hardcore. Like, I was that
kid.
kid.
Saved today.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, man, that's cool.
Yep. So it's cool. I mean, I think it's not uncommon. It's probably even a natural part of your salvation story is you these ebbs and these flows. And I think, that was me at that time for sure. And, it's interesting how things had worked out.
See, having the firm foundation, like that really being rocked. I've also seen that in people who've grown up in church who never got to experience like other things.
Yep.
And so then they meet the real world and they have these yearnings, these desires that they just didn't get to talk about.
That's real.
And it was just, oh, that's the devil. And so it's like, yeah, but I feel some type of way.
That's real. And
then they get old enough to experiment just living life, and then they take it and they run with it. And then, for some people, I'm like, we're still trying to pray them back into the kingdom. Yeah. And for others, they had their season and then they're like, okay, all right, God, I'm done. And then they're back. But I think everyone, in some aspects, multiple times in your life, like you come back to like, okay, but do I believe what I really believe?
Yep.
And that's a pretty natural part of just faith.
Yeah, I would say so, right? Like I think of growth, and you probably think of it similar. It's never just like a nice straight or diagonal trajectory, right?
I wish.
Like I like when people talk about growth as like a spiral. Like I don't know, like there's moments where it looks like you're going backwards, but really you are going forward, and there's moments where you're going forward, but you will be coming backward a little bit. I don't know. Like it has ebbs and flows.
There's no, it's a weird kind of, you just gotta be, I hate that whole cliche, you just gotta enjoy the journey. It's about the journey and not the destination. I'm like, okay, we overuse that a lot.
Yeah.
But the journey it's important.
You're right.
Because the terrain is not the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Depending on where you go, today we're in jungles and it's like, all right, this is thick and I have no idea where I'm going. And then other times you're just in the desert, just staring off into the distance and you're like, and this is just as bad.
You're right.
This is just as bad. Like, I don't know which one of these I would prefer, but that's it is a part of the journey.
Yeah. And I've noticed too, like, I feel like one of the things that's interesting is I look back at what kind of made it maybe a tougher season was the fact that when I did have certain questions and I would ask someone in leadership those questions, the answers I would get were really poor. And that's not always the case at all churches at all, right? But like that was just my experience.
Right.
And it started to erode my confidence in the church because I was like, man, do they really think that this solves that question or that problem?
Yeah.
And it made me it just decreased that faith and that, that confidence that I think I had even in like leadership and some of those things. And I feel like a lot of people kind of have that experience with different things. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, they experience the real world, and there's something that seems to contradict maybe what they had grown up assuming or being taught. And the reality is sometimes there's more than one way to understand something. Mm-hmm. And not all things are that way, but there certainly are things like that. And just because you grew up in an upbringing where your church said the answer to that question is this, there might be a different answer.
Yeah. And sometimes I think it's okay to say, I don't know.
Right.
Because there's times I go like, God, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no reference of, there's just nothing for me to look at. And even in people's lives around me, for me to look at and say, I understand where this is going. And instead of just giving a quick answer, it's just like, there's some gray area and a lot, even in the Bible, like you're reading and they say something in a verse and then they move on and you're like, there ain't no commentary on this.
Right.
No one's gonna talk about this, huh? God just dropped that in there and then he moves on. Yeah. And that's even for blessings and for, things that we would consider a curse or a sin. Like, we get the prayer of Jabez and then it's like, this person begot, this person begot, this person begot. And then Jabez prayed this prayer and God blessed him. And then this person begot and you're like, well, that's a great blessing.
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
God, what is this about? And he's like, Jabez is inconsequential. It doesn't really matter. Just know that this is important and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can understand that aspect of it. Yeah. Yep. So Jason.
That's right.
Jason. Now I have a really good friend whose name is Jason. So as soon as you said that,
is it him?
I was like, you have a Jason, too? Something good and prophetic about that name, Jason. So
I gotta keep that in my pocket. My future son will be Jason.
Jason is okay. So tell me about Jason, because he's got apologetics and he shows up in the middle of a crucial season in your life.
That's right. Yeah. So, really incredible journey there. Like the amount of selflessness that he had to be willing to just connect. First of all, connect with someone that, like, he never even knew me. I'm from another church. Someone just like recommended I chat with him. Mm-hmm. But for him to literally be like, yo, let's meet up next week. And after like 200 meetups, like I still had issues. Right. Like I feel like, man, after 20 meetups, you'd be like, dude, I think I've given you a lot of information. I got a family, I got work, I'm busy.
Somebody else will lead you the rest of the way.
Yeah, like I think I helped you a lot. And dude, just the fact that like he stuck it out with me, you know what I mean? Because a lot of times I feel like, a lot of our journey, like things don't get resolved overnight. Like they really don't. It could be years, a decade, like it takes time. Like I think most of the growth in my life and most of the things I had to overcome, like each of them took about a decade. Like even the purity one, like I feel like it, 15, I started to recognize this thing. Mm-hmm. And it probably wasn't till 25 where I was like, man, I really don't even think about this anymore. Like it's not something that I feel like I struggle with. Wow. I feel like it was like a 10-year journey, and I'm sure it could have been shorter, right? Like had I maybe met right people that could have helped me navigate through that, and had I probably opened up sooner to people about it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It was a journey. And then the doubt thing was another journey. I would say that was like 20s to 30s was really that journey, So it's interesting.
Man. Yeah. Okay. So we get through that. You're going through, you're in Bible college.
Yeah.
And so what was your focus in Bible college?
Yep. So my degree was biblical studies.
Okay.
And I loved apologetics. So that was why I went to the school. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up getting really involved in the apologetics ministry.
Okay.
And then I ended up being the president of the apologetics ministry my senior year. So that was something I loved. I loved apologetics. And more so than any of my classes where I was learning other things that were also things I enjoyed, the apologetics was what was my biggest interest.
Okay.
And so it was a really great environment for that, really incredible professors that, I could ask questions to and hear different perspectives and things like that. But ultimately, it was a really awesome experience. Like it was like I loved going to school there. Everyone was actually like awesome. Like, I don't know. A lot of times you think like Christian college, like, it's just the name Christian, but like.
I was going to ask. I'm like, listen, I went to just regular college and I didn't even finish. But like Christian college? Like, is it? I'm sure there's some outliers out there where it's just
I think this was an outlier. This was a cool school. Like it was, I don't know, like majority of the people were super genuine. People were like very mission oriented, like whether they were taking business for their degree or communications or whatever, like they had a strong Christian influence and they wanted to make a difference. And so, at the end of the day, it was super fun, developed a lot of awesome relationships there, and didn't fully know what I was going to do, but I did feel like in this season, I think this is like the place for me to be. And I think it was, especially going back to like struggling with doubt and things like that. It was kind of like an ideal environment to be in to process through that. And so it allowed me to recognize honestly that a lot of my issue wasn't really like intellectual. Like I thought it was early on. And probably at about 22, I started to recognize like, you know what, even if I get answers to certain questions, there's still something deeper going on. Like what is driving me to ask all these questions? And interestingly, I feel like a lot of things in life are that way, where it's the beneath the surface type of, situation that's really going on. Like even with purity, I realized it really was an anxiety issue for me. And so it was a form of managing anxiety. I would turn to that basically. And I think with this doubt type of a struggle, it was really a lot to do with, I think, me and my dad's relationship, not having like an earthly father where I felt loved, really made that chasm that there is a heavenly father that would love me feel like irrational, but it was ultimately an emotional issue.
So you get to a place where you can process through you. Like I love that about God, that it's not like the Bible is the Bible and great experiences. And we believe that it is the authoritative word inspired by God. Right. But there's that aspect of just, you're reading it and it's reading you.
It's real.
And then you're like, okay, I don't know what this thing is in here, but somebody help me understand. Because am I even asking the right question? This is the question I know to ask, but is there something else I should be asking in this moment? And God is always gracious enough to be like, no, you're not. But you were willing enough to open up and ask. So now I'm going to tell you what it is that I've been trying to get to you and get you to process through. That's great.
So it was a lot more of, unpacking emotional suitcases, I guess. Right. And like daddy issues at the end of the day. I think that's what a lot of it was.
There was a father wound.
Father wound. That's what it was.
So how are you and your dad now?
We've got a great relationship. So what happened is, a lot of this, I started to kind of recognize this around 22, that, man, I'm recognizing that this is a lot more of an emotional thing. And so I had a conversation with my dad when I got back from college that semester. And I remember just talking with him, and it was just a really good heart to heart. My dad started crying. He basically shared like, Tony, like I grew up on the East Coast. On the East Coast, it was tough, and it was tough love. Like if we were going to be like nice and, show love, like that was a sign of weakness. And so he's like, we're not the way I grew up. Like you don't do that. And so for whatever reason, like that's how he operated as a father as well, you know? And so it was a big eye opener for him to see that, especially because I have 3 younger sisters. And that was my big motivation for bringing it up, is I was like, man, I already went through this. Like, I don't want them to have to go through the exact same things that I had to go through. Right. So I wanted it to just like, hey, I just want to make you aware, like this is what I'm dealing with. And I think it's a result of this kind of a background experiences. And thankfully he was really receptive. And I will say that opened up a door to allow for a lot more healing and a lot better relationship, which has been great.
Now, did dad get saved too with mom?
He did, man. So I got a fun story with dad. Ready? So
let's go.
He didn't get saved for a while, right? And so
normal.
I remember at 18 when I had said, I'm about to go into college, and I tell him, hey, I'm going to be doing the internship at the church. Like I want to go and do that. And of course, the internship costs money at the church. And he's like, you're paying money to do an internship at for him, it was like the world's biggest scam, right? Oh yeah. So I remember telling him like, Dad, I'm going to do it. Like I want to do it. And he was building something in the living room. He had like his wrench out. He got so upset. He literally grabbed the wrench, chucked it across the house at me. It didn't hit me. I moved, so it didn't hit me. But like, he was furious. He's like, my son is joining a cult. Like, it really bothered him. And, you know, from that experience to, you know, fast forward even just a couple years, it was very different. Like my dad, I think what happened at that time, it was 2007.
Okay.
And if you know,
yeah.
2008, I mean, there was just a crash, and my dad was in construction.
Oh, so he got hit hard.
He got hit so hard. And growing up, we always did well. Like my dad's business was really successful. We always had whatever we wanted, all that kind of thing. And that was the first time in his life where he literally was brought to his knees, where he went from having a successful business to literally losing homes and being in a position where now our property next door that we own, we are losing that. A cabin in Utah, lost that. He's just trying to hold on to anything that he can possibly have. And in that moment, he was kind of like me at 15. He was at the end of his rope.
Right.
And it was amazing to see how God met him in that. And he finally had given his life to God in that season, but also God did like a miracle and honestly opened up an amazing project for him to work on. It wasn't in Vegas, which Vegas was hit so hard.
Yeah.
It was in Hawaii. So he sent his guys out to Hawaii. Wow. They did a big hotel in Hawaii. They had 100 guys out there. It was like a 2.5-year project, and it allowed him to get through the recession. Even though he still had a lot of bruises and lost a lot, and it was really painful. It was a beautiful testimony of him choosing to trust God in that, and God doing something that he never had that happen before in his life. You know, he'd never had a job that big, and to see that just the timing of it truly was an answer to prayer. And I know still to this day, my dad talks about that, you know, as being like a moment where he saw God move, and he believes that God will do that for you, right? Like it was his testimony.
That's an interesting mirror of your life.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of something that I've been just looking at in the Bible of just God's promises on our lives are not original to us. Like it started in past times.
So
it's like it starts with someone, and then we just pick up the ball in our life when we decide to take that. And so, you know, your love for architecture and just working with your hands. Your dad has this business. He's doing the same thing. Mom gets saved. You get saved later.
Yeah.
You're going through these things. You come to the end of your rope. Same thing has to happen for him. He comes to the end of his rope. He gets saved. You're processing through emotions. You open the door for him to have that conversation with you. And then now he's able to process through emotions. And it's just like this, like, oh my goodness, everything is like,
it's crazy, huh?
Just together. Like God is generational. Like he's never just like, oh, well, Tony, I got you. And
That's
you know,
so
your dad's
true.
over there. But it's like, no, like that whole story has kind of just weaved itself together. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but
No, I haven't really zoomed out. It's helpful to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a cool perspective. I love that.
man, I'm like, oh wait, so you're okay. Your
The end
love
of the road
for
thing, man. It's crazy.
the architecture. All right, this makes perfect sense here.
Yeah,
This is
this-
all kind of connecting.
That's cool. That's a
Okay.
good perspective.
So, college, we're done.
We're done
You
with
graduate.
college. Yep.
What are we doing next?
That's a fun story. I'll share it because we go to the same church. So Jabin was the youth pastor at the time at the church that I had previously been a part of.
Okay.
And so Pastor Jabin,
before you moved, was he a great youth pastor? Because I've seen videos and clips, and I've heard stories.
he was an amazing youth pastor. Hands down. He was amazing.
We love you, Pastor Jabin. We love you. You're amazing.
He really was. And it's funny because I was in college, I was probably not there during like the heyday of it.
Okay.
To be honest, like I would go back in summer. And so during summer, I'd be back in Vegas and I'd be involved in the youth ministry and get to see what's going on. But for most of the year, I was gone.
Okay.
So guys like Jay and Kyle,
Okay,
they had probably more insight there. And so Jabin was transitioning out. He was going to be moving into more of like, traveling, speaking, doing all of that. And at the time, our pastor, we needed an interim youth pastor.
Okay.
And so I was coming back from college, and then Jay Hubbard was also in the church at that time.
Shout
So
out
he's
to
like,
Jay.
yeah, shout out to Jay. He's like, hey, you guys can be the interim youth pastors. So me and Jay are like, all right, I guess we're interim youth pastors.
Here you go. Get him in there.
So post college, that's what we did for about a year. The hope was like, we'd be interim youth pastors, then we'd be the youth pastors, but it didn't work
Right.
out that way. And it actually is better that it didn't. partially because we probably just weren't truly ready for that. And so there was a new youth pastor that came in at that point, and Pastor Daniel Fernandez, who's incredible, like love the dude so much. And so I got to do ministry under him for the next about 2.5 years.
Okay.
And so function kind of like maybe as like an assistant, or I don't know, basically on the youth team.
Okay.
You know, so still very involved in youth.
So how do you, man, so now we're in ministry. Okay, God, maybe youth pastoring. Okay, nope, that's not going to be it for this season. So then where are you going from there?
Yeah, so I ended up doing that for about 2.5 years. Well, actually, I did it for a year, and then our church planted a church plant in Orange County, California.
Okay.
And so I ended up going out there as the youth director, so running the youth in Orange County.
Okay.
I did that for 6 months, and I ended up getting terminated, pretty much. And I don't know all the backstory to it, but I will say God is good. And even in what seemed like the worst thing that could happen, like I moved completely out there. I've got like, you know, a lease. I have, you know, roommates. Like, I don't know, like I'm in all the way. I have another job to help cover bills. Like I'm in it. And then I just get like a notice of like, yo, in 2 weeks, like you'll be off the staff. Right. Dude, it was no joke. It was like cutthroat business
church.
side. Yeah, dude. It was like
church doesn't. What do you mean?
It was fun, right? So, but you know, God is so good. So literally 3 days later, my friend calls me from Vegas. Her name's Sue, and she's like, "I had a dream about you last night or 2 nights ago, and it felt uncomfortable bringing it up to you, but I really feel like God's telling me to tell you about it." And so I was like, "Oh, what was your dream?" And she's like, "Yeah, I was walking through the church offices in Orange County, and I looked in through the glass wall, and I saw that you were in a meeting with one of the pastors. And in the meeting, you looked really sad. And so I'm just calling to see if everything's okay or what's going on."
Wow.
And I literally was like, "Sue, that's amazing. I really needed to hear that, because just, you know, 2 or 3 days ago, I just got let go. And if anything, I don't know what's next, but it gave me peace of mind to know that like God sees it." That's all I needed. Like, okay, cool. God sees what I'm going through, so I don't need to worry about it. Like he'll provide. Like, right. I really believed that. And so he gave me the grace for that season, I think, to be able to transition really well, to say, okay, I know God's in this and I'm just going to trust him. And the youth pastor in Vegas at that time heard the news, and he's like, "Oh man, well then I want Tony back here in Vegas with me." So I said, "All right, I'm going to go back to Vegas. I want to still do youth ministry."
Okay.
And I had an opportunity come up out there, but I would say like denomination wise, it was just different. It wasn't like our speed, I guess. Right. So this just felt a lot better. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to Vegas. Did a year under Pastor Daniel here in Vegas. And then a church here locally was looking to hire a youth pastor or youth director. And so transitioned out of my home church to go there to run that youth group. And so did that. It was a Walk Church. You might be familiar with Walk Church. Pastor Hayden Ratner.
So I've heard of the church. I haven't been.
Okay, yeah. So really amazing group of people. Hayden is like really awesome dude. And so he's actually, it's funny. We went to school the same year. He graduated Silverado 07. I was Green Valley 07. Wow. And he's like a little like mini basketball Vegas legend, right? Like growing up, I always heard Hayden's name. My friends would play basketball with him. Anyways, he ended up playing pro overseas and some things like that. But he came back, he got saved in college, planted a church here. They needed someone for youth. So I jumped in there, did youth ministry. And during that time, I like to say like I got bit by the business bug. Like, I don't know, like I had no intent for business up until that point really. And I'll share some really incredible, like God moving situations prior to that.
Go ahead.
But
no, please do. Please do.
Yeah, I got bit by the business bug, and at the time was just thinking a lot about like, oh man, what would be a cool business to start? And like, what's a problem that exists? What's something I'm passionate about? What's something that frustrates me? Like all these questions that start to hit you when you're trying to think of business. And I was at a conference at my old church. They had a guest speaker in town.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember how this all went down, man. It's been a minute now, but basically I went up to the front and he began to pray for me. And at the time I was debating to launch a business, and it was going to be a dating business. And I think it's like, sometimes you create a business solving your own need, right?
So that's okay. All right. If I would have thought you were going to say you were going to start a business, there might have been a few things I could have pulled out.
Right.
But the dating business, that's okay.
Right?
All right.
So the idea was like I was driving with a couple buddies in a car, and we were all single dudes. And we're like, man, why is it so hard to meet like a cute Christian girl? And this is 2014. I don't know if things are different or not, but it was tough. And so we were driving, and we were like, man, I wish there was just a way that like we could all like interconnect somehow, right? And so the idea was going to be, and it probably would have flopped, so that's good that God probably led me in a different direction. But it was like almost like a group hangout / dating thingy, where like you and two of your friends would meet up with someone else and two of their friends.
Okay.
So it's very Christian, right? You're not alone. You're in a group.
We're all together. We're purity is check. We're all good.
Right.
It's lit. Everyone can see. Okay, great.
So I was committed, man. I was going to go all in on this thing. And the pastor that was the guest speaker was praying for me. And he's like, I feel like God is telling me to tell you that you've been thinking a lot lately about what's next. And he's saying that the idea that you have for what's next is not what's next. And then he went on to say that God is going to bless you in the area of construction. He's going to give you a unique idea, and he's going to connect you with the right people to help make it happen.
Okay.
And then that was it. So unplugged, that's the only information I got. And from there, it was basically like, all right, I have no construction ideas, and I don't know who these people are, so I guess I'm just going to walk this out and let's see what happens.
Now, was construction even, like, you're a few years removed from even thinking about, like, architecture or anything like that. Was that ever at some point just in the back of your mind, you're just like, I just got a random sketch pad, let me sketch something out? Or were you just disconnected at all?
Yeah, I was 100% disconnected.
Wow.
I had no thoughts of going into construction. Like, if you know me, like, I'm not actually a handy guy. Like, my wife calls me Bam Bam because, like, when she needs something fixed around the house, like, I just hit it and try to fix it that way.
Okay. We'll get back to that.
We'll get back to that.
We'll get back to that. Yeah.
So long story short is, basically that moment happens, and I'm like, all right, putting this dating business off to the side, but still very business minded and want to start something. Like and I think at that time, the root was like, I wanted to build something for myself, and not in a selfish way, but I had felt like at that point I was about 26. In the last 10 years of my life, I felt like in a good way, I had been serving someone else's vision and helping them build their vision. And I had gotten to that point where I was like, man, I really want to build my own thing. And it really wasn't out of pride or selfishness. It was just like, there's something about us as humans. We want to do that, right? And so I was, continuing to think of these different ideas. And one day, at the time, I was working part-time now at Walk Church doing youth. Okay. And I was part-time. I had 3 jobs. I was part-time at a moving company and part-time valet.
Moving company? Man.
Yeah.
In Vegas?
In Vegas. Ooh. Man, that was a good job, man. That was tough.
Man, you were in shape. There is no way.
That was the one season I was in good shape. You're right. That's fair.
You're just sweating in 115. Can you move my couch up to the 3rd floor?
Some heavy furniture that people order too. I'm like, crazy. So props to furniture delivery.
Man, you got a special crown in heaven for doing furniture moving in Vegas in the.
Yeah, furniture delivery was tough, man. That was no joke. And I literally can remember being 27. It was my uncle's furniture delivery company, and I'm out on the back porch sweeping up styrofoam because guys throw stuff in the dumpster and they miss and it's everywhere. Yep. Getting paid like $13 an hour, and I'm just like, man, what am I doing? I just felt like a failure. Like, what the heck? Like, I'm 27 years old. Like, I haven't figured something out, and I'm out here on this back porch sweeping styrofoam. I don't know. It was just one of those moments where I was low, and I was just like, I didn't know what was next, but I just still was thinking like, I really want to start something, you know? So it was.
And before you move on, can we, like, if you're listening, you can't see me looking at you, but if you're watching this, I just want you to hear this story. College, switches majors from architecture to now we're in Christian college. There's some business sprinkled in there. He's 27 at the time, and he still doesn't have it figured out. Like, that's normal. That's not like some anomaly. Because I'm listening and I'm like, okay, you're finding out all of these different things along the way and it's still kind of not. It's like I thought it was this, and it's not. Okay, I tried that. Okay, God's bringing something back around. Everything is happening in the correct season. God's ordaining all of this, and we still haven't arrived at like the thing yet.
You're right.
Like we still haven't got there. And you say 27, and I'm like, most people would be like, oh, life is over by then. I'm almost 30.
Yeah.
Like I should have had this figured out. Well, this person's got this figured out, and there's an area, a place in life to be able to self-reflect and say, well, had I done all these different things, like we can get into that, but you're still on the journey. So just like if you're listening to this, like you're still on the journey, it's okay. Don't freak out. Like it's not supposed to be that way where you just found it. If that's for you, great, but that's not everybody's story. So I wanted to interject that in.
Love
I'm
that.
like, that's
So true.
I'm like, oh, I wasn't alone at 27, still trying to figure out like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because I'm not sure. Okay.
Crazy,
Okay. Keep
man.
going.
That was a great point. And I feel like it is so common. Like at 27, I got my sister, she's now probably 30. My other one's 26. But like, they're all figuring it out still. And some of like are just now figuring something out that's their thing, right?
Yes.
But it's so true that like everything leading up to that point really is shaping you. And I do love the reality of like, he who is faithful with little will be faithful with much. And that was always something that was close to my heart. And I literally remember being an intern at 18. You know, I was cleaning windows at the church, and the pastor came up to me, and it meant a lot. He was like, Tony, I can see your hard work ethic. You're going to be successful one day. And I remember that it just meant something to me. I was just like, cool. Like I'm doing the right thing. Like I'm going to give it my best effort, whatever I'm doing. And at that point at 27, I love the analogy of like the Chinese bamboo tree. I don't know if you heard that analogy much, or maybe a little bit.
Say it, and then I'm gonna tell you if I've heard a variation of it.
When you plant a Chinese bamboo tree, you put the seed in the ground initially, and for the first 2 years you're watering it daily, but each year you're only going to see about 4 inches of growth. So super minimal growth, a lot of effort. Now come into year 2 and year 3, you're going to still water it once a day, but instead of seeing just 4 inches of growth within a year, it's going to shoot up about 10 feet each of those years. And I felt like that was a good analogy for me for life. I was like,
Mike Todd, I think he just preached a sermon called Bamboo Season.
No.
I think it's in my watch list. That's why I was like, wait, this sounds
crazy.
awfully.
That's
so
too
this
funny.
is just God telling me I need to go listen to it.
I got to go listen to it too. I love it.
I'll send it to you. I think it's in my watch for later on YouTube, but I think he preached that over like the last year or so.
Dude, it's literally like one of my favorite analogies. 'Cause I feel like it's such a realistic picture of growth, right? Like that's kind of how growth works. And so at that season, I had felt like, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to do next, but like everything I'm doing is developing things in me, whether it's character, whatever it is, like things are being developed.
Right.
And so what ended up happening next is I did a furniture delivery to a warehouse here in town. And when I walked in to deliver a big sofa, I saw 3 shipping containers that were offices, and they looked awesome, dude. So you can imagine like cool industrial warehouse with like bright orange, bright green, and like bright red container offices with like really beautiful glass front doors, rooftop decks with patios interconnecting them. Like it was fresh. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like I've never seen anything like this. And I thought, man, I would love to try to build out one of these little containers into like a little home. Like it just was something that I thought, oh, that'd be kind of fun. So I didn't give it much thought, but the next day I happened to have the day off, and I'm on my computer and I'm like, oh, let me go on Craigslist. How much are those containers? And I'm, just searching, and on Craigslist, it's like, this guy was selling one, and it was $3,500. Or no, I'm sorry, $3,950, but it was already like a third of the way done. Like he had bought the container, he had already put it in the door, like cut out all the holes for the doors and windows. There was a lot of doors and windows, so he put a lot of work into this thing. It had some electrical, some flooring, and he was building it for a convention booth, and his client fell through, and so he was just looking to get rid of it. And so I go to visit with him and show up at his property. I see it, I really like it, and I'm leaving out a really important fact in this whole story. And it's the night before I was at my parents' house, and I had seen that my dad built my sister a treehouse in the backyard. And I was like, how much did it cost you to build that treehouse? And he's like, oh, I did it for $1,000. And I'm like, what the heck? like my rent right now is $1,000 and like I pay it every month and I don't own it.
Right.
I'm like, why isn't there a more affordable housing option? Like, it doesn't even make sense.
I'd live
like
in that tree
literally
house.
I could live in that and that was $1,000, right?
Right.
Like it just seems so dumb to me with housing, right? So that was on my mind. And that same night, this has never happened ever. My mom came up to me and she said, I really felt like God told me to give you this. And it was an envelope. And I opened up the envelope and there's $500 in it. And I'm like, Mom, I don't want your money. Like, I don't need your money. Like, I'm working a lot. Like, I'm doing fine. Like, I really do not need your money. I promise I'm good. And she's like, no, you're going to take this. I really felt like God told me to give it to you. Never in my life has that happened. Just this one night.
Okay.
Well, the next day I'm, doing Craigslist and I see this, container. And so I go to visit with the guy. He's asking $39.50. I offer him $3,500. He doesn't take it and I leave because I thought, I would want to get it for $3,500.
Right.
He calls me back 2 hours later and he's like, someone else is coming by to buy it for $37.50. He said, I like what you wanted to do with it and I'm willing to sell it to you, but you would need to come back with $39.50. And it's almost like, it's like when there's urgency to a sale, you're ready to buy. Like the urgency was there. Now I was like, I offered him 35 and I thought I can come back in a week. And if he still has it, I can maybe get my number.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I have to get this. This is the time. Well, prior to my mom giving me $500, I had $3,400 in my bank account.
Okay.
So the extra $500 that she gave me was the exact amount I needed to technically be able to afford this.
Yeah.
So I went there. I went to Wells Fargo, pulled out all my money, drained my bank account, gave him all the money I have. And now I have this container that got delivered to my parents' property and dropped off in their driveway. And I told my parents, I said, in 3 months, I'll have this done and off of your property.
They're like, what? He said he didn't need the money, but what is this container?
Yeah.
What in
is
the
happening?
front? I love that as kids, we never stop. It's like, Mom,
Poor parents.
there's things here. Look, I just need you to take it, but you don't even live here. Right. That's not the point. Listen, this is going to stay right here. Okay.
That's right.
I promise. And they're just like, what are we going to do?
Dude,
they never stop bringing things
Bro,
home.
yeah. So it was May 5th, 2016. The container popped on my parents' property and it took me 9 months to finish it. So I told him 3 months.
Okay.
And it did not take 3 months, but for the next 9 months, when I had some time off, I'd go there, I'd work on it. And then at the end of 9 months, eventually it turned into a little tiny home.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is where.
That's where it starts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so many questions. All right. While you're working on this home, like, what are you thinking? What are these conversations like between you and God during this 9? I thought what you thought was going to be 3, which is now 9. What are these conversations with you and God about this tiny home?
Yeah. So it was cool to see God's even hand in that initial process. Even the genesis of getting the container was God's hand super involved. And what's interesting is I was still working the moving job at that time.
Okay.
And I remember just early on in this process, my manager came up to me and he said, Tony, I had a dream about you last night. I'm like, man, that's not the first time I've heard that, right? This has been happening.
What is your dream?
Yeah,
Please
literally,
tell me
right?
I'm not crying and sad.
I need more of these dreams.
Please don't tell me I'm crying and sad. I'm happy, right? Please.
He's like, yeah. He said, in the dream, you actually weren't working here anymore and you had started your own business and you were coming back to just say what's up and you had your polo on and it said alternative living spaces on there. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And that's a really cool name. So that ended up being the name of the business. So the business is Alternative Living Spaces.
Yeah. So that wasn't even like wow.
It's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty trippy.
Okay.
So yeah. And then my dad was really involved. He has a construction background, of course. He helped me. He built our first home growing up. He built the home that they were in at that time where the container was at.
Okay.
And so he knew construction well enough to help coach me through that first container. Like I shared earlier, like I'm not handy. And so I definitely didn't know what to do. And so he would be like, all right, step 1, let's go get you windows. So he'd be like, I got a friend that sells windows. And he'd hook me up with his friend.
You're doing a mini flip.
It's a mini flip.
Okay.
You're right.
All right. Okay.
So he'd hook me up with his contacts. So like he hooked me with his welder, his electrician, his plumber. And so that really fast forwarded that process for me, which probably would have been harder. But because I knew like, cool, Dad's in my corner. He knows what he's doing. Like I feel comfortable that I can take this on.
Okay.
And so about a third of the way through, once he was helping me, he was like, dude, this is a lot. He's like, you're kind of on your own now, but if you have questions, let me know. Right. So at that point it transitioned to like, okay, I'm winging this thing. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to look at YouTube videos for whatever ones were around at that time and just try to make this thing happen. And so it was the next 6 months of just slowly getting to the finish line, basically.
Okay. Now, are you thinking this is going to be like your expectations? Because obviously what happened has happened, but your expectations, are you like, okay, this is going to be big and then I'm going to have this business? Or are you just more like, I'm just fumbling in the dark? I don't even really know what we're going to do with this thing when it's done.
Right. So I definitely, it's interesting. At the time I had some misunderstandings about how the housing market works. And so I literally thought like I could build this thing and I could put it anywhere in town. I didn't realize about permitting or any of that.
Okay.
I had very big visions at that time of like, dude, these are going to be everywhere. And I'd say, yeah, so the vision was for sure a business. Like I never was building it to just keep it. Okay. It was always like, I'm going to build it, I'm going to sell it. And then whatever I make, I'm going to try to build more of them. Okay. And so that ended up being the journey of finished it. And then, I met up with Omar. We went to the same church, Omar El-Tak. And so he helped me make the video of it. And sure enough, he's an amazing videographer.
Yes, he is.
It went viral. And so I finished the container home. It was actually exactly about a year later that he filmed. So it would have been like May 5th, 2017. Okay. We go live with a YouTube video on someone else's platform that had a big audience that showcased homes. And like instantly, I launched the website the day before. So now I'm like, I'm a business owner. I'm going to make more of these, right? You're like, dude, I wouldn't want you to make those my home with that experience. But I went for it. I was like, dude, let's see if more people want these. I'll build more of them. And so launched the website the day before. The next day, the video goes live. And like within hours, it has like 10,000 views. And it's just scaling and scaling and scaling. Wow. And my inbox is like hundreds of inquiries about container homes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what is happening? And basically, end up selling that container from that process. So that basically was like, in a lot of ways, put the business on the map, which was a really helpful thing when you're starting a business. Like looking back, I'm like, man, that was God's hand. That was luck. Like whatever that was, like it wasn't me. Like it was Omar. It was something, right?
All these different people.
And so the video ends up getting over 2 million views, and the website probably, I don't know how much traffic that much, but I probably had 500 inquiries in the span of about 45 days. Okay. And so I was like, man, there's so much traffic, and I don't know. So I eventually sell that container. All the money I made from that container, I had bootstrapped the whole thing. Like I was working my jobs, and then I'd save up money to finish the container. Okay. So whatever I sold that container for was all money that I had earned up, that was, I can use for whatever I need to. So I was getting all these inquiries, and I locked in the next sale. And so I said, man, I think I just need to get like a warehouse. So I took the next step to get a warehouse. Okay. At that time, I had a good friend of mine that I ended up becoming a good friend through the process of the finish work on the first container. His name's Chris, and he's a really good design eye, and he helped me with a lot of the finish work. Okay. And I was like, yo, Chris, you want to hit this next container together and just try to do these things? And so, we basically, the next step would be we got the little warehouse, got the next job, and then continued building from there. So,
wow. Okay. This is great because if anyone looked at that, if they pop into your life, you sell it, you launch it, they would say, okay, overnight success. They just be like, oh man, this guy just woke up and, container, and you totally could just frame the story like, yeah, I bought this container, put some time and effort into it, thought it was going to be 3, and it turned out to be 9 months, and then I went viral. Yeah. But everything behind this is what brings you to this moment.
You're right.
Like all of those steps is what God used to be like, okay, I need to get you to the marketplace. But he takes you out of the marketplace to get you back to the marketplace at the right time, in the right season. The housing market has changed. Yeah. People are buying and selling houses very differently. Regulations have changed. Like it's almost like, okay, man, if 2008 doesn't happen, can you say that your business would have blown up the way that it did, because would there even be a market for it? Like tiny homes wasn't, I'm thinking like back then, I'm like, maybe you would have seen it on like the Travel Channel, like, this is a very unique thing. People are like, okay. But now in that season, it's just like, okay, no, people really need this.
Right.
Like this works today, and it may not have worked previously.
You're right.
And then all of these people, even your dad, coming back around like, okay, I'm going to walk you through some of these things.
Yeah.
And we do that with Wealthy Investor, where we're helping students learn how to do a fix and flip, how to do a wholesale, how to get into rentals. And they just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so having someone come alongside of you and be like,
so important.
Please don't do this. I'm going to put a window right here.
You need a guide, man. You need someone that's been there before. You're right.
So you're okay. Now we got to get to the Bam Bam.
Okay, the Bam Bam.
Wife calls you Bam Bam because you're not very handy, which is a little counterintuitive for building custom tiny homes.
You're right.
So how do you, if that's not the strong suit? How does that fit into you making this work?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. So what ends up happening is Chris, my friend that was helping me early on, was definitely not Bam Bam.
Okay.
He was like good builder, finisher, all of that.
Okay.
So we complemented each other really good. I'd say my strengths at that time, like I really enjoyed sales, marketing. I really enjoyed a lot of the business side of things.
Okay.
I loved design and I loved being part of the whole process of a build, but I just wasn't going to be the best person to do the work, right?
Gotcha.
And so on our next probably 5 builds that we did, I functioned like half and half.
Okay.
We literally had we started with a little 900 square foot warehouse. I mean, it was, once you put a container in there, like, dude, there was like squeezing by around.
Yeah, it's not a lot of space.
And then my office was a Costco shed, $900 Costco shed. You can get just plastic, has a little cheap fake window.
It's got to be hot in there, man.
Dude, that was my office. And so I would work on the unit the first half of the day. And after lunch, I'd go into the little office and I'd answer the emails and phone calls and do some marketing or whatever. And that was how the business in the very first, few builds went down. Okay. And then we hit our first winter. Like, even though we went viral, it wasn't like an overnight success. Like within 3 months, whatever leads we had, those ones were gone. The video plateaued and we had to figure out, man, how do we continue to get leads?
Correct.
And by that point it was, so I sold the container in July, had built 2 more containers, and now it's January and we have no builds. And we're just scraping by, dude. So we're like building ramps for churches to push up their carts into their portable church. We're like remodeling his parents' house, Chris's parents' house. We're building furniture for this lady in Hollywood and bringing it out, like just whatever we could come up with to feed ourselves, because we didn't have a container build. And so that probably took about 6 weeks of like, we had nothing and we just needed to get creative.
Right.
And then we had to build land. And so we're like, okay, we're back in business, kind of, right?
Okay. Oh, thank God.
That wasn't fun. And so we're back in business. We're building out this one build. And then sure enough, we land a pretty good little project, and it's 5 containers and it's out in Utah. So we're like, man, well, we can't fit 5 containers in our little warehouse. So how are we going to do this? So we talked to the landlord, and the next 2 little warehouses next to us are available. So we said, okay, we'll expand our lease and we're going to get the next 2 little warehouses as well. Okay. And so we get the next 2 little warehouses, and now we got and then we see a random tiny home on the side of the road that someone, not the random, like in an RV complex, I guess. Yeah. And so we're like, dude, let's just knock on their door. Like, that's kind of cool. They're in a tiny home. So we knock on the dude's door. Sure enough, Josh answers the door. And Josh ends up being our first hire. He built his home, and he has a construction background. Wow. And we share what we're doing, and we click, and we're like, dude, Josh, you want to come help us out? We got these containers we need to build. And so he's our first hire. We end up putting out some ads, getting a couple other hires. And now we have a small team. Okay. So we got me, Chris, and 3 other guys. And we start plugging away on this project of 5. At the time, I now shifted into the office full time because we were busy enough to where it was like, we need to try to manage the projects and try to get more, try to keep a little bit of a bigger space busy. We have employees now. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think I lost my train of thought there, but basically, from there, yeah, just start marketing and hitting the ground, trying to get more sales to keep the crew busy.
Man, so it's funny because, we've been going to the same church for a while now, and had no idea. Like, I'm like,
fun.
huh. I remember you talking about it, and I remember hearing about everything that was going on, even seeing some of the videos and things, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And never just, I'm like, okay, all of this is happening and going on, and you're processing through all this. I'm like, and this is the first time we're really sitting down
That's
really
crazy,
to
man.
talk
I know,
about this, and
huh?
all of these things were going on. And even it's crazy because church community is so important.
You're right.
The same people who you've met, Omar,
Yeah.
Jay, Pastor Jabin, I'm like, wow, I've had my own interactions with these people for the direction that God has taken me in my life.
Wow.
And vice versa, even with them, for where God's taking them in their life. And so we're all doing this same kind of, not the same work, but we're all in the same community. We're adding value to each other at different points along the way. And we're all in the same community. We're like, wait, you had a conversation with this person. And I think it really speaks to like the anointing that's on our church in this season, because there's been a lot of businesses that have really blossomed out of our church, and I don't even know if
It's crazy.
like, I know it's not something that we talk about. Isn't even a plug for our church, but community is so important, because you just never know who's going to be able to help you where in order to accomplish the things. Like, if these dreams don't happen, you don't have the name. If these dreams don't happen, you don't come back to Vegas.
You're
like,
right. Yeah.
there's
I
a
would
lot
have
of
started the
things.
dating business.
You would have started if
I'd have been in trouble. I don't even know how to run a dating business.
so you're married.
Yes.
You're married. I'm assuming you did not find your wife from the now extinct dating business.
That's correct.
Has she heard about the dating business?
She's heard about the dating business.
What was her response to you are going to start a dating business?
I think she's glad I didn't. Yeah, I think she's happy I went a different path.
So so all of this is happening, and you start dating and you get married. So where does that even?
Yeah,
how does that happen? What's going on there?
That's a good question. So I was at Walk Church doing youth ministry.
Okay.
I was in the very early stages of the business, and I got invited to an ugly Christmas sweater party. And at the time, I honestly didn't go out much. I was maybe more like the working hermit, man. I was like trying to do the business thing. I'm busy with church. Like, that was a lot of my time.
3 jobs and a tiny home in your parents' front yard.
And so I was saying no to things. But that night, I, for whatever reason, said yes. And thank God that I said yes.
Okay.
And my buddy, Cameron Fox, was like, hey, there's an ugly Christmas sweater party at our friend's house.
These name dropping. I'm like, all of these people just,
I know,
okay.
And so I'm like, yeah, I'm down. Let's go, man. That'd be fun. So I get my ugly Christmas sweater on. We go to a friend's house. And, most of us know each other. It's kind of like our majority of like our friend group from church. And so I kind of recognize everybody. And I'm hanging out in the kitchen. And then the front door opens and someone new comes through. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who is that? And she really got my attention. And she had her reindeer green ugly sweater on.
Oh, you better remember what that sweater looks like. She's gonna
I need to find that
she's gonna be
thing.
like, what was I wearing? You better remember.
Right. So, dude, goes to show how I am though. Ready? So that entire night, I did not say one word to her. I just was like shell shocked, nervous, but I was like, she's really cute. I'd love to get to know her. And so I didn't say anything. And the night passed, and it was what it was. And I thought, man, I hope I can run into her in the future. That's kind of what happened. And I'm getting a haircut from a friend, and she starts talking to me, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to be moving in to my friend Karen's house, and we're all going to be roommates there or something like that. And I'm like, Karen, which one is Karen? And she begins to describe her, and I'm like, oh, that's Karen. I was like, Lily, I think Karen's really cute. I'd love to come hang out sometime or whatever. If you guys need help with stuff.
I'm coming to help you move.
Yeah, I'm down to help you move.
If she's going to be there, I will be there to help.
Yeah, you need things repaired. I'm super handy. I can help you.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Right?
I'll figure it out.
So sure enough, that's kind of what happened. We crossed paths a few more times and got to do, just talk a little bit, but they needed like a washing or like a dryer like brought upstairs. It was something like that, right? Like a washer or dryer brought upstairs. And I was like, oh, me and Chris can come help. Yeah, that's like for sure we'll be there. So
Chris
we get like a dolly. Yeah, Chris,
I'm
right?
like, what? Why?
He's like, dude.
Are we not busy? Are we okay?
So we get the thing, we bring it upstairs. And then on the way back down the stairs, like I kind of, Karen's off to the side, and I kind of pull her aside and just had an opportunity to be like, hey, I'd love to take you out on a date. And thankfully she said yes.
Okay.
And so our story's kind of interesting, but we went on probably like 6 dates, and I'd say the dates went good, but I felt a lot of pressure that like, and I think it comes back to like my kind of like Christian churchy background of like, I don't know, like I didn't know how to date, I guess, maybe. But but I just felt all this pressure as like the youth pastor that like, I gotta know, like I have to know the answer of like, you're the one or you're not the one. And I can't lead you on, and I can't like date you not knowing and then it not work out and like all that kind of stuff,
Okay. So I grew up in church, but I had enough like non-church experiences to be like, okay, I can do the dating scene and be cool about it.
Yeah.
So it's funny to hear that, because I know a lot of guys who are like, they're really in church and they're like, we really don't know how to date. And I was just kind of hoping that the angels would come down and be like, she's the one. And it never ends up like that. So there's like this slight anxiety of like, how do Christians date? And I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. Just go talk to her. But like purity, I'm like, you're not even at that point yet. Yeah. Just go say hello. What about purity? She doesn't even know your name. She just go say hi. Like,
that was the toughest part. You're right.
Oh man. So that's
dating.
Now was she same kind of anxiety or fear there, or was she kind of chill?
She was way more chill. Yeah. She was saved at the point. Like we went to the same church, and her background wasn't a Christian upbringing, so for her, she was a lot more normal about things, I'd say.
Okay.
For me, I was like, made it a really big deal, and basically felt all this pressure to like I don't know if she's the one, like I don't know if like I can marry her or not, and I just felt like I had to make a choice. And so I remember, this is kind of funny, but like that night going to the, I think it was like after a date, basically like calling it off. And I'm at her house. And so I leave. And as I'm leaving, all of like her roommates and our mutual friends are pulling up. And I'm walking out being like, yeah, like called it off. Like, yeah, like I just don't think it's the right fit. And, all these things.
Yeah.
And they're like, Tony, like, what are you thinking? Like, dude, get back over there. Like, dude, she's perfect for you. Like, they're all just like, dude,
they can see
what
it.
Are you thinking?
Like, is it God?
Like, why are you shooting yourself in the foot? And so I'm like, they hype me up, and I'm like, you're right. Like, she's probably the one. Like, God. So I go back to the house thinking like, I'm going to knock on the door, ring the doorbell. She's going to answer, and I'm going to like undo what just happened. And knock on the door, ring the doorbell, and no answer.
Oh no.
No answer. And so I'm like, I guess it's done. And no joke, left. And we went to different churches. So we didn't naturally cross paths unless it was like me intentionally trying to be hanging out in that crowd.
Right.
And so 9 months go by and we didn't talk.
9 months?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we get to the happy ending, we gotta camp out here for a little bit. Okay, you're former youth pastor director. Okay. Yeah. So you know a lot about like teaching and preaching to the youth about just God and your future spouse. So like for our people, let's reflect on that. Like dating in church.
Yeah.
What do you feel like we do really well at?
Yeah.
And then what do you feel like we're like, okay, we're missing the mark in just helping the next generation who's coming up, but then also just people who are single, like in processing through that whole season of singleness. I even hate saying that. I'm like, what is this Christian thing that we've created? So like, where would you say those two things are? Yeah,
I really feel like, for me, I don't think I felt like I had the green light to just be able to freely date. like as the youth director, I don't want to say it like that. No one was putting this on me. This is how I felt internally, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, but I felt a lot like, you know, I didn't give myself the space to recognize like it could take time and you don't need to have it figured out right away. Like, dude, if in 6 weeks you don't know, like that's okay. Like maybe you'll know in 12 weeks and then in 12 weeks you don't know, that's okay. And I think for me, making it official that we were going to be a boyfriend and girlfriend was equivalent to getting engaged. Like basically, right? Like I was almost dating to try to determine like, is she the one I'm going to marry? And I think I like missed a whole step in there of like, maybe the right question would be like, would she be a great fit for us to be a boyfriend and a girlfriend, which is a way less severe of a commitment as being married.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to marry you. No, what? No, not at all.
Literally like, yeah. So that's,
but you said you didn't feel like you had permission.
Yeah.
Now, are we, some of that I feel like could be you, and some of that could just be like just church culture, not even specifically to the church that you were a part of, but just church culture in general. Cause we're not really good in the church about talking about like dating. Biblically speaking, they didn't date. Like you just got married off and you hope your parents had good selections and that you were pretty enough to like, there's a whole thing. It's a whole nother time. Like we don't even need to dive into that, but like to not feel the freedom to really be able to mess up in that season, which is a normal thing in dating. It's like, oh, I had a bad relationship. Oh, that's a normal thing. Where do you think like that came from, of just that pressure of like, was it just, strictly positional or just,
if I'm honest, it also probably stems from my family background. Like, I don't know why, but like growing up, we didn't talk about relationships. Like, I don't know, like we didn't get into those kinds of topics. And so I think there was a level of pressure. Like, I don't even want to like introduce people to my family yet. Like all of that, like once you're boyfriend and girlfriend, now I'm introducing you to my family. And that's like a big deal. And I was like the Christian dude that like was single forever. Like I'm talking like probably at 19, I got out of a relationship and I was probably single till 27.
Wow.
And I had dated a little bit in there, but not much. Like I really was just single and doing whatever I was doing. And so, I think the extra pressure of like being in the seat of like a youth director, or even if you're like a strong youth leader, like you don't really feel like you have permission to mess up. Like, cause you feel like you kind of do need to be perfect. Like, even if that's self-imposed, like you do feel that, and you want to be such a good example for the youth that you don't want to find yourself in a relationship that isn't going to work out. But the reality is like, there's only one way that a relationship can work out. Is by putting yourself in the spots where it can't, you know what I mean?
You gotta, but I understand that.
Yeah.
Because doing youth ministry, even for myself, we're leading the youth, we got to be a good example for these kids, and they're looking at you. So you can't be dating wrong.
Yeah.
You don't be out here doing the things. And it's like, okay, just in reality, the average youth leader is like age, I would say, is probably like 18 to 27.
Yeah.
By the time you're 30, you're like, all right, I'm too old for this. You're phasing out. But that's the same space and time when you make truly some of the biggest decisions and have some of the biggest blunders in your life.
You're right.
So to have that expectation of like youth leader trying to, and a lot of it, even on the purity side, is just like, you got to stay pure for your wife and you got to stay pure for these kids. And you're like, I'm just trying to date. I don't even know. And
that's a whole other thing too. The purity in dating thing is like, yeah, that's just tough.
I'm like, oh my goodness, that is, not to say that, I don't think that's everybody's thing, but there's a big group of people who are just really trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so for you to be in a position of leadership and you're still trying to, navigate through that, and you're going straight from like, we have 9 dates. Am I going to marry her or are we not? I'm like, I think about me and Jasmine. I'm like, 9 dates?
9.
Jeez. I don't even know. I was just still trying to figure out if we were even going to be a couple.
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking it's when we first started dating, we met in college. She had an outfit too, blue dress. Still
There you
remember
go.
blue dress.
It's the outfit sometimes, huh? It gets your attention.
It's always that first outfit. I'm like, huh, she's cool. I like this. This is cool. This is college. This is it. Okay, I like this. But we were just like, I didn't even know if it was gonna last because I was like, oh, this is my first college relationship.
Yeah.
So the odds of me even staying with her is slim to none. I'm a freshman in college. Like,
It's crazy.
so for you to be on the spectrum of like 9 dates, is she gonna be my wife?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, first college relationship.
Right.
This will probably be over quick, and we'll be like, yeah, it was just a thing of the past, and we'll move on. So those two different dynamics is interesting to see.
And that's cool. You guys, and you're married with kids. Like, I mean, like that's wild. First college relationship.
Yeah, it was.
Because I remember being in college, like, dude, people went through a lot of relationships. Like, I think I maybe know like one person from like the college relationship early on stuck through.
I thought that was gonna be me. Like, I'm in not from like I didn't think we would last, or but just the normal, like, man, it's college. Like the odds of you, it's like when you meet someone who's like, man, I married my high school sweetheart.
Yeah, it's just
like
rare.
the odds of that being your story are pretty low, and you're just kind of like, y'all happy? Like, this really worked? Oh, okay, cool. I could never.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But no, we made it through. We did long distance for a long time, and I would not advise that.
That's tough, dude. That's really
for
tough.
anyone. Like my level of insecurity during that time, and just the distance, and sometimes I was close, and I could just drive up and go see her, and then come back home. Like there were days I would get off. She would call me. My off days, she was in Alabama. I was in Warner Robins, Georgia. So we're about 3.5 hours away, and we're hitting a time change in there too, going from Alabama to Georgia. And so she would call me on my lunch break on Wednesdays, and she'd be like, hey, I want you to come see me. So I'm like, but I know tomorrow's my off day, but she's like, I want you to come see me. You're not doing anything tomorrow. You're going to be off. So I'm like, all right, bet. I get off work. I go home. I get some clothes. I put it in my car. I drive 3.5 hours to get to her. I'm losing an hour. So it's like, all right, that's fine. I get to her. I'm with her all Wednesday night, all Thursday. And then I get up Friday morning, put my clothes on for work, and just drive straight to work. And we did that for a while. And then some days we would go months and we wouldn't see each other because I'm working, she's in college, and I'm just like,
that's tough.
I would not advise that.
Dude, that's hard.
For anyone.
That is tough.
I would never tell someone to do long distance without being like, are you ready?
Dude.
For a whirlwind of
Dating
emotions.
is tough, man.
It's hard.
It's already hard enough not long distance. I couldn't imagine doing long distance, dude. That's crazy.
It's the one thing that I realize now. I try to treat our dating in my own way like we were married. And in my mind, you're single until you say I do.
Yeah.
Like there's some things that she did that I had no control over. And not even like now that we're married, like, oh, I just have control. Not in that sense, but there's more of a collaborative effort around things when you get married.
Yeah.
But other than that, like if you're single, like if she said, man, I really want to go, there was a stretch of like, she's like, man, I want to just go hang out with the girls. And they were just college. They were just going out and partying and stuff.
Yeah.
A normal college thing.
Yeah.
But because I was at a distance, I was just like, okay, but I can't be there. And I know how guys treat, like as soon as you say, yeah, I have a boyfriend and he lives in another state, you may as well be single at that point.
Yeah.
Like I know the college atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so that caused a lot of anxiety for me.
Wow.
And we just had to work through it, sometimes to a point of where I'm like, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And she's just like, but we can, and I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm insecure, and there's just stuff going on. And there's a lot of immaturity in it. And so I'm like, now looking back, I'm like, okay, just be single. Like date, do the thing.
Yeah.
Make sure you're doing it God's way. Like there's definitely parameters.
Yeah.
But all these expectations and this pressure of, are you going to be my wife? And am I going to be your husband? And are we going to raise kids together and do all these things? And how are we going to blend our families? It's like, man, do I like you today?
Yeah.
Do I like you tomorrow? Do I like how you eat chicken wings?
Right?
I don't like that smacking you do. 10 years later, that smacking is, I still don't like it.
That is real.
I still don't like it, but we had to process through that stuff. And then eventually one day it was just I did try to let Jasmine go though.
Wow. So you went down that path.
I
Or you started to maybe.
She graduated and she had always told me, she was a little prophetic. She told me that we were going to get married and have kids, and it was going to happen right after she graduated. Now, again, at the time, I'm thinking this is just going to be a short term first college relationship.
Yeah.
Well, it ended up going the distance, and she was graduating, and I was in Jackson, Tennessee at the time. And I was like, I let my little birdie go because she wants to be married with a husband, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I still want to be out here playing the field. So I had to go break up with her.
Wow.
And I was going to, when she was going to see me or I was going to see her, right around her graduation. And I was like, all right, here's the plan. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to break up with her. I'm going to tell her she's a great woman and that she deserves the world. And there's a man out there that's going to give her everything that she wants. And these last 3.5 years have been great. But we got to bring this to an end. I had it all figured out. And then I went to they're now our spiritual parents, Eddie and Denise Nichols.
Wow.
In Jackson, Tennessee. And I told him, I was like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And they had met her and they were like, oh, we love her. We think she's great. And I was like, hey, Eddie, listen, I'm about to break it off. And he's just looking at me like, what? And I'm like, yeah, man, this is what she wants in life. I got to let it go. Like, I don't want this. I mean, I do, but not right now. And she needs it right now. So let me just let her go. And he asked me one question. He was like, but why would you do that? Like, she has everything that you would want in a wife. And you just want to let it go so you can go do stupid things with your life. And I was like, well, when you put it that way, that sounds real dumb. But this isn't dumb because, and as I went to speak, I had no answer.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm going to get back with you. I'm going to answer your question. I got 0 sleep that night. I literally, I was living with my uncle at the time. I went home and I couldn't rationally think of a good reason to break up with her. I was, at that moment, we had just been dating for a while. I was like, oh my goodness, she could be my wife. I would be happy to dwell with her forever. I would be happy to like raise a family with her. I really love her. I think I'm going to marry her.
Wow.
And then I went back to his house the next day and I said, Eddie, I'm gonna propose.
Wow.
And
that's crazy.
He
That's
just
a
smiled. He
big
looked at me.
change.
He was just like, I know. And it was just one question. He was just like, why? I had thought about marriage and I knew she was great, but nobody had ever asked me after all that time of dating. I was just like, man, I could have married her a long time ago. Like, I never felt the pressure to be married.
Yeah.
So I wasn't thinking about it. She didn't really push it on me. And she wasn't even pushing it on me then. I was thinking about something she had said.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get out before she could say it again.
Yep.
But in that thought process, I was just like, oh my goodness, and I hate to say the one, I think that's a horrible terminology.
Yeah.
She was the one who I was happy to be with.
That's great.
That I wanted to go on that journey with. And I was like, I don't want to have to redo this all over again.
Yeah.
With someone when I've already found that person. So I called my parents and I was like, Mom, I'm going to ask her to marry me. And my mom just starts crying on the phone and she's like, oh my goodness. And she's talking to my dad in the background. And I'm like, yeah, I gotta marry her. This is the one. And then I went and started looking at rings and I was like, I can't afford any of this. So I bought a pink heart-shaped ring. Super cheap. And I was just, but I knew it was like a couple $100. And it wasn't even really like, I looked at all the wedding rings and they were like, oh, you can do payment plans and stuff. And I just looked at it and I was like, no, this is the ring. This is me. This symbolizes my love.
It's cool.
And she graduated. I went down for her graduation, moved her up to be with me. And the same day that she got there, I proposed.
Wow.
And I was like, I didn't move you here to just be my girlfriend. I want you to marry me. And then she was like, oh, you go through the whole thing. And then I'm like, all right. Dude, so we're off amazing. To it. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. It all came down to that question, huh? You're ready to call it off.
He was just like, but why?
Dang.
And I was just like, I don't know.
But cool for you to talk with them. Like, it's like the power of spiritual counsel. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? To have people in your life that know the truth and that can help keep you on the right rails, Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
Because I was out.
That's life. I mean, that's like life-changing decision right there.
Yeah. I don't know how people, and they have counseled us through we've been married for 10 years. Yeah. And they've counseled us through literally everything.
Wow.
And not like, oh, we did premarital counseling. Like, we lived in their living room. I have argued and fought with Jasmine in front of them.
Wow.
And they were like, okay, y'all done? And then they would discipline both of us. And they're like, all right, now go home and do what married people do and be happy and figure it out and continue to process through this.
Yeah. And
when I think about having that in my marriage, and then I talk to other people and they don't have that, I'm like, how y'all making it? Like, who's the couple that you go sit down and that have wisdom?
Yeah.
That can speak into your life and that both you and your wife mutually agree to. And they're like, I don't have anyone like that. I'm like, you need to pray for spiritual parents to be able to come in and do that, because I don't know how we make it or how we would have made it without them in our life.
That's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Church community, man. That's huge.
Listen, that's where you
can find that stuff.
It's everything.
Yeah.
So 9 months.
9 months.
9 months. We got to bring this back. 9 months. What are you thinking in 9 months?
So I definitely am not thinking that Karen will be the one. I had moved on, started dating somebody else a few months after.
Wow.
That relationship lasted about 5 months, and then that relationship ended. And it was a really good learning experience, I think, going through that, because it gave me more clarity on what I did want. And ultimately, at the end of that relationship, the thing that truly broke it off was essentially like on our third date with that at that time in this other relationship, I had said, hey, at the end of the day, like, God is first in my life. Like I just kind of put it all on the table. And I'm like, that's the youth pastor. Like, third date, I'm like, you need to just
Jesus,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Jesus is with me.
Trying to make it clear that, like, if you want to continue, like, I'm down, but like, this is what my life is all about. Because I think she had made a comment about like not being first in my life. And I just kind of was like, I just want you to know, like, God is first in my life. And it doesn't mean that like you're taking the back seat or anything like that, but God is so important to me. Like, my life has been transformed by him. Like, everything that I'm doing is roots back to that purpose.
Right.
And so, when I had told her that, it broke off, and, probably about 3 days later, she reached back out and she said, you know what? I gave it a lot more thought, and I really respect that God is first in your life, and I want God to be first in my life. And so that relationship, her name was Jen, whatever, it started, right? Well, 5 months down the road, it gets to a point where she's like, man, I thought I wanted God first in my life, and I didn't think you were serious. And
oh, wow.
And honestly, like, I recognize the trajectory you're going in and the trajectory that I want to go in, and we're just going in different paths. And so I don't see this working out. And it was like the most mutual, like, it's almost like a business, like, all right, sounds great. Have a great day. See you later. And we each went our separate ways. And at the time, City Light Church was doing night services.
Okay.
And so I started to pop back into the 6 p.m. night services. And, this is probably a couple of months later. Karen was at one of the services. I ran into her and just kind of said hi. and just thought, I always would talk really highly about her. Like, oh, Karen is amazing. Like, man, like, cause I really believe that, like, oh, she's beautiful. She's like really smart. Like she's cool. Like she's a total package, but like, she just wasn't for me. Like, that's kind of how I would kind of frame things. And so when I saw her there, I still had those thoughts and, but thought, hey, we don't match up. Like it didn't work. And, that was in like November, and fast forward to, January 1st, her friend Lily, who was her roommate, and Arlene, you may know Arlene.
Yeah, I know Arlene.
They FaceTime me and they're like, hey, we just were thinking and we were talking and we really feel like you and Karen would be so good together.
Leave it to the friends.
And we just
Leave
think,
it to the friends.
yeah, the friends. Thank God for the friends, man. God help me. I need people in my life that can help me, bro. So thank God they were there. And they were like, you should really reach back out to her and you guys should talk again or whatever, right? So that day I just shoot her a text like, hey, Happy New Year's. How have you been? You know? And so she gets the text. And so it's like a small chit chat thing. And basically she's a flight attendant at the time. And so she's going to be out of town for a little bit, but we kind of coordinate that when she's back in town, we're all going to hang out.
Okay.
And so she comes back in town, we all hang out and it just goes really good. And I'm like, man, we're jiving. Like there's something here. And maybe we hang out one other time and I'm like, man, I am going to ask her out on another date. We're going to try this thing again if she's open to it. And so I basically, I think she was out traveling and it might've just even been through a text like, hey, when you come back, we should catch up, just me and you, and go out to eat or something. Right. Well, what's funny is I feel like our early dates were like more formal-ish, right? Like, okay, we're going to go eat. We'll do a movie. We'll do like, you know, like,
right. You do
like, I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
you're setting it up. Okay.
Dude, and this time I was like, well, what do you want to do? And like, somehow, I don't know, remember if it was her idea, but like she sent me the, like, you know, the Google address, blah, blah, blah for Glow Zone, which is like a glow in the dark kid fun kind of place. Like you go there, there's like rock climbing and like zip lines.
I wasn't expecting you to say Glow Zone.
Bro, it's a Glow Zone.
I don't know what I was thinking.
Something that wasn't Glow Zone, right?
These stories are going, you know,
different directions.
Yeah. Okay. Glow Zone.
So I'm like, yeah, let's do it, you know? And it was just so different than our other dating because it was just fun. Like we're both like to be active and do things. And we got to be in an environment where like, we're doing rock climbing and like ninja warrior weird, like, you know, course thing. And so it was just super fun. We ended up getting dinner afterwards. It just went really well. And it felt super different from our previous season, which in that previous season, I was doing a lot in my life. And I don't even think I was in a good place to be in a relationship. I was emotionally depleted. I forgot to share this, but like now that I think back to that season, I don't even think I had the energy or the emotion within me to like be present with someone and like be there. And I remember going back to interesting dreams. I remember having a dream in that season and I looked in the mirror. I was like walking through a Home Depot. I looked in the mirror and I saw my face and it was like the most droopy, lifeless, sad face that I had ever seen in my life. Wow. And I felt like it was a picture of how I was internally at that time. And so I do think, you know, that time difference from that season to this new season where we started dating, I was also just in a very different headspace and emotional space. I was healthier. I felt good. Like I wasn't in that season. And so it was just lighter. And so we were able to continue dating and it just was really fun and really good. And I don't know, it just worked out. Like, you know, we did. Yeah.
What were you doing as far as like on the business side? Was that what was kind of contributing to the unhealthiness? It's growing. For sure. You're in that like true startup mode.
Yeah.
Like that's all kind of happening all at the same time.
For sure. And I'd love to try to piece where I was at in the business at that time. But business, what made it tough is at that time, I was still a youth director at Walk Church and trying to run the growing business. And so I was being stretched from both ends. And like any church job, like usually your role is not just your role. No. It bleeds into like everything.
You're here, you're breathing. Here.
If you're in ministry, you love being in ministry. So like you're pretty much cool with that. And I think that was the case. Like I loved doing everything. So I was youth director. I was also called grind team director, which was our setup and tear down. So I was overseeing all of that. Then of course, like there's church events and you're naturally, if you're on staff, you're involved.
You got to be there.
So it ends up being like 25 hours a week, probably, that you're dedicating to your church responsibilities. And then on the business side, Chris is working full time on the business. I'm trying to match that because I feel bad. Like we're in this together and like, dude, we're like, you're putting half the equity in sweat equity. I need to be putting half the sweat equity into it.
Right.
And so, and honestly, even at that time, I might have even still been working valet. It was like chaotic. I was easily doing 80 hours a week and that's just not healthy.
Yeah, that's not healthy.
It's not healthy. I've learned for myself, like 55 hours is kind of like, I notice once I go past that, I'm emotionally not in the best place, you know, or I'm letting go of other things that need to be a priority in my life.
Right.
Like physical fitness or my relationship with God or my relationship with others. You know what I mean? Like something's going to go that's important when I start going past that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys glow zone, and then
Glow zone.
If you're watching this or if you're listening, just do normal people stuff when you're dating. Like, I know that sounds like, oh man, that's kind of kiddie to go to glow zone, but just go to glow zone. Some of you are going to get the glow zone anointing.
Yes.
Right now, you're going to feel it, and you're going to ask your whoever you're dating, or if you're married, glow zone. Find a glow zone near you. They're not an official sponsor of the podcast. They probably should be at this point.
Yes.
But you find that glow zone anointing, and you go have fun with your spouse or whoever it is that you're dating, and just be normal. Like just chill. Like, it doesn't matter in this season if you're struggling with like, is she my wife or is he my husband? That doesn't matter. Go to glow zone and just have a good time.
I love it.
And then now we pick back up with the rest of the story.
Yeah, it's like date 2. We went to like New York. We went to Little Italy, or what is it called? Italia or
the Italy. Yeah.
So we did Italy. Then we went to New York.
I love that place.
I know, right? And we did like the arcades and the roller coaster. Like we were just doing things that were fun and it was light, and I don't know, it worked. It was cool. You know, it really kept it simple, you know.
What was your moment where you were like, okay,
you know,
we got to propose now?
So you're right, man. It evolved, right? Like it went from like, hey, we're dating to like, okay, we're going to be boyfriend, girlfriend. Like this is going really well. And then it turned into a point of like, you know, I'd say for us, you know, we probably dated for a month, became boyfriend, girlfriend, and probably for about by month 6 of just even interacting again, I knew like Karen is the one for me. Like this, I want to get married to her.
Right.
But then I would hear pushback from people like, hey, that's too quick. You know,
Lord. Yeah,
and my mom would be like, well, have you like prayed about it? And do you know that God is leading you into this? And like, she made it overly complicated and over spiritualized something that I knew in my heart was the right decision.
I just love her. I think that's enough.
Man. And so it dragged it out longer, not a ton longer, but like, I'd say I knew in like, say, like August of that year, and I didn't propose till December.
Okay.
So basically it got pushed back a few months because it was like more like I was listening to outside voices, which is good to get like counsel and things, but at the end of the day, I knew what I needed to do. And so then that December, we got engaged, and then we had a COVID wedding, and that basically meant that the wedding venue shut down. And so, you know, we had all the invitations, everything planned out, the food vendors, and the wedding was scheduled, I think it was for April 16th. And come February, you know, we had to cancel like our honeymoon that was going to be in Bali and all that. So we started canceling everything. And you know, it actually was still like a beautiful, wonderful wedding. We ended up getting married in March, and ended up going up. We found like a hill in Lake Las Vegas. We got like a arbor, like something, you know, with flowers everywhere. And then we had friends and family. At that time, you like couldn't have a group more than like 15 people gathered or something like that.
And then you're like 1,000 feet apart.
Yeah.
Like, hey, so we just told everyone like,
you can come, but you might need to stay in your car, or I don't know how this works. And so we had the COVID wedding. So it's crazy.
And how many years has it been since?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
How marriage is good?
Marriage has been awesome, man. Yeah. And we're starting our family. So we got Levi, who's turning 2 in December.
Is it 2 already?
Already 2. It's crazy. So
Man,
it goes by fast, man. So awesome little boy. I'm like, dude, it's so much fun being a dad, man. It's been just a blast. Like, dude, nothing like it. And we got number 2 coming in March.
Okay.
So
boy or girl?
Boy.
Having a boy.
So 2 little boys. So I'm
boys.
excited, man. A lot of wrestling going to be going down.
Oh, yeah. Special prayers for Karen.
Oh, poor Karen, man. I'm like, we do need a girl here. Eventually.
Yeah, because she's going to be like, can you guys, like.
We're too much, dude. We're, especially like bedtime. Like I say I get off work at 5, we'll do stuff, but like his bedtime's probably say like 7:30. And that's right when I get like a second wind, and I'm like, let's, wrestle, playtime. And
I just
not help with bedtime.
At this point, Jasmine she just yells at us. Xavier is 6. And so she's just like, why are you still, he's like, Dad, okay, I think I can jump over this. And I'm like,
I think I can jump
I was like,
over
I think
this.
you can too. Actually, you know what? I think you can go a little higher and then jump over that. And she just stares at me. I'm like, what? He's not like, maybe he hurts himself. We'll figure it out. She's like, pick it up now. And I'm like,
yeah, shut it down.
I'm like, Mom said we got to stop. I just wanted to be clear though. Mom said we have to stop. Dad's the cool parent. So we're fine.
Right.
So yeah,
that's hilarious.
Two boys in the house. That's going to be great.
Yeah. I'm excited, man.
That's going to be great.
Yeah. I grew up so I had 3 younger sisters growing up. I always wanted a younger brother. So like, baby, next baby came, it was a girl, then a girl, then a girl. I was like, oh man. So to get 2 boys has been really cool. I definitely would love to have a baby girl.
Okay.
And we were hoping number 2 is going to be a girl, but it's going to be a blast as a little boy.
So in the business now,
yeah,
where are we at? Because now HGTV.
Yeah, we got some fun stuff.
I was checking out the website. Like
cool.
You've got different designs. Like, so where are you at with the business right now, and where do you think you're going?
Yeah, man, it has evolved so much, and I would say it's been really cool. Like, so I'm at about year 7 of business now.
Okay.
So like I had shared, 2016, I started that first container bill, officially pulled out my business license July 2017 after I sold that second container home. And since then have learned a lot, actually a ton about myself. And it is so interesting how in business, I would say it's almost like you'll hear people talking about like know God and know thyself. Like that's 2 really important frameworks to understand.
Correct.
And I think it's true in business. Like you really need to know yourself to understand the type of business that you can best operate. Ooh. And for me, I always thought success in business meant having a really big team. Like that's just what I thought. I grew up, my dad had a big business. My uncle had a big business. They each had about 100 employees. And so in my head, my framework for success.
That's huge.
Yeah, my framework was to be successful, you have to have a business and you got to have like 100 employees. Like that's all I knew, right? Like that was my mindset. And so I went out pursuing that. And so as our business scaled, it went from 1 little warehouse to 2 little warehouses to 3 little warehouses to now we're in the parking lot and the landlord's kicking us out because we're taking up too much space and there's not more space around us to take up.
Right.
So we end up moving probably 3 or 4 different times until where we're at now. And, basically I thought, we're going to have a bigger team. And so we grew the team and never hit 100 employees, but ended up getting to a point of a team about, I'd say like 15 to 20, you know? So that's where we were about. And I started to realize I don't love managing a big team. It's not my natural skill set. There's some guys out there that are incredible managers and incredible leaders. And as I looked and evaluated what my natural skill sets were and what I enjoyed doing, it didn't involve a lot of that aspect of running a business. And so what ended up happening is business became a bit of a drag. It was like, people will say like you leave your 9 to 5 to get your 24/7 when you go into business. It was almost like I left a job I didn't like to then get a job that I did love running business,
right?
But I didn't love the day-to-day operations of it. And I ended up getting to a point where one, it was hard to manage a big team because my natural skill set isn't managing people. Like I didn't love like correcting people. I mean, these were all areas that I needed to grow in, right?
Yeah.
And at the time we operated, like our overhead each month was about, I'd say like 75,000 for like payroll, our facility, the basic kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it just began to get to a point where it it felt like too much for me to manage. And I didn't know what the way forward was for someone like me. And I'm thinking like what can I do? Like, I don't want to keep scaling this business and get to a point where it's just more to manage when I'm already not enjoying managing it at this level. And long story short is there was like a cool pivot moment in the business that required a little bit of a leap. And it was basically me stepping out of the manufacturer's seat. So majority of our team at that time was builders because we're trying to build these tiny homes and it takes a lot of manpower to build them.
Correct.
And so I end up trying to figure out how can I run a business model that doesn't have as much overhead. So like when I think about business, it's like step one is like, how do I start a business? Step two would be like, how do I structure a business? And step three would be, how do I scale a business? So for me, when I thought about scaling that business, I would have wanted nothing to do with that. And I realized, okay, that's not the kind of business that I would want to scale. And so what ended up happening is I got to a point where I just had to make a choice. I'm not enjoying what I'm doing now and I'm not enjoying operating it. And I don't know if what I'm thinking will work, but it's kind of like the best option at this point because I don't like what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And so I ended up basically trying to develop a network of outsourcing relationships for the manufacturing. So instead of me having to build, like say you ordered a container home, instead of me having a crew that I'm paying for a facility for and I'm managing all the overhead and they're on my payroll and all that, I'm like, how can I outsource this and work with other builders that can help to fulfill and still achieve the same end goal, the same quality, but it's just a different process. And so that's what we've been able to do. So it's crazy, but we've gone from an overhead of $75,000 a month to an overhead of probably $7,500 a month. We've gone from a team of, 15 W-2 employees to now we still need a lot of people because we're doing more container homes than we've ever done, but it's just not through W-2 employees. It's through 1099 relationships. It's through other businesses. And so instead of everything being built here in Vegas at our facility, it now gets built. We do the first 25% at the port, right where the container's at. So we buy the container from the port. We do all the structural right there with the companies at the port. Then it gets shipped to another location where they do all the rough-in, which is like your framing, electrical, plumbing, all of that. And then it goes to the finish yard, which we have two of them. One of them's here in Vegas, another one in New Mexico. And at those locations, it'll be like drywall, finishing out your bathroom, finishing out your kitchen. And dude, it's been amazing. It's been so much better. Like if you were to ask my wife, like, dude, I have a pretty decent amount of gray hairs now, right? But they all came from not this year. It was all from like 2 years ago.
When you were trying
to do it all.
Into
more when I was trying to manage, trying to be in a role that probably wasn't my sweet spot. I think naturally my gifting is probably a really good number 2 in a large organization and not being a number 1. As a number 1, you usually need to have, I'd say, strong leadership qualities. You usually have good management qualities. You're not afraid of confrontation. You usually have thick skin because a lot of stuff rolls uphill.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it. So even like with you guys, I think about Ryan. Like Ryan, I think about him and I think about someone who fits that role really well.
He's a solid.
Really solid.
He's a solid number 1 guy.
And those people are rare. When you have a solid number 1, it's like you guys can do amazing things and he can manage probably a big operation.
Yeah.
For me, I noticed my personality type usually is a really good number 2. Really trustworthy, really dependable, someone that a number 1 can lean on. But of course, I have my own business, so it's not like I'm in that situation.
Right.
And so
how does that work?
Yeah. And so it was trying to figure out, well, what kind of business could I run that I would enjoy? And now things are just very different. And this business model works amazing, dude. I love it. It's a lot more like a solopreneur business model, or you'll hear people talk about the term micro business. And I feel like it's been the best thing I could have ever done. It really has. The business is now way more scalable. So like we're in the process of trying to close out a project right now, and it'll be 45 container homes.
Wow.
Now, in the past with my old business model, to achieve 45 container homes, dude, every container home takes 3 people. I got to hire 150 people to try to manage this.
You're at your worst nightmare.
Yeah, that's like a nightmare for someone like me.
Okay, we're going back. So
Yeah.
we're still following this trend of your family. So your dad has a business, 100 people. Your uncle has a business, 100 people. God wants you to have a business. He gives you a business, but the season and what he has for it is different.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, he's the God of, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but they all did 3 totally different things to get us to the point that we needed to be at that point in the story.
Right.
When we get out of Exodus, we're like, we get out of Genesis, we get into Exodus, it's a whole new season. He's
So
like, okay,
true.
I'm ready to establish a nation, not just a people. So I kind of see it that way, where you're like, okay, God, listen, I'm not my father.
Yeah.
I'll take the blessing that my father has. I'll
Yeah.
continue it in your name. I'll honor this covenant, but I'm not my father. And so he allows you to struggle with that and find your own way of doing business that's still scalable, that's still
Yeah.
great. It fits your personality, it fits your skill set,
Yeah.
and you're able to do more, probably in a way than even what, your parents were able to do, just because of the nature of the blessing that's on your life.
It's been interesting, man. And it's like, I feel like even with this new model, I can have a bigger impact than I could have had under my other model. Now, had I been maybe wired differently and enjoyed different things, maybe it would have looked different and that
Yeah.
model would have been great.
For sure.
But I think given my natural skill set, what I enjoy doing, like this has been a really cool middle ground where I can still do what I love, which is kind of like architecture. Like I've always loved, I always said I want to build like I get to be a part of building things. And instead of it being like someone is an employee of alternative living spaces, they're all basically like partners.
Right.
So it's a very collaborative relationship. It's very peer to peer. It's never looking down, which you don't even do that as a business owner either.
Right.
But like it very much is like they're independent owner. And so like each of our finish shops have they have their own business license. They're ran by their own independent operator who operates it, and they can take on projects that aren't my projects. And it's just a really, it's a beautiful win-win for everybody.
As long as everybody's doing their thing.
Yeah.
It's great. Honestly, when you say that, that makes me like think about like church, and pastors don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like they just don't.
Yeah.
It's just not. And we could go into the litany of reasons why or what that's for and all that. I think one of the things that the church could be better at is, if you're going to hire someone in your church, the investment of not just them as a staff member, but them as like, okay, you've got to be able to go make money.
That's cool.
Because the majority of churches, and I know a lot of people don't even realize that, the majority of churches, the main pastor still works a 9 to 5.
Wow.
And
That's
he's
wild.
not, he's not bringing in $1 million offerings, and he doesn't have the big mega church experience. Like,
Wow.
it's a very small percentage of people. And so a lot of pastors are still working. A lot of their people, and even if they do have these big churches, like they're making like 50, their staff is making like 50, 60K. They're not making a lot of money.
That's a good point.
And so it's like, well, yeah, we want you to work for the church, but we should also be like equipping them to
You know what?
do other things. And you kind of have that concept in your business of like, yeah, we work together. This is very much a business, but you also can do other things that can, if something was to happen and I can't bring in a whole lot on this side, you can still go leverage your skills and your experience. And I think from like a church structure kind of standpoint, the way that you've modeled your business would even be like very beneficial for people, because they could do that, still have a great staff.
Yeah.
And the staff doesn't feel like, man, I don't have I don't have to do all this. And then even from the standpoint of like, man, I don't want to have 100 people,
Yeah.
but we could have a unit of people who are making this work,
Yeah.
but it just looks different. I think that's a unique model.
That's interesting. And I love that you called it the structure is different, right? Because it is so interesting. Because even where I said like, yeah, step one is like start a business, then structure the business. Structure is so important. And I think about like when a tornado goes through, say, Oklahoma, if the structure is very rigid, it could get destroyed.
Right.
If the structure is really flexible, there's a higher likelihood that it doesn't get destroyed. So an example is grass. Tornado flies through an area. what's the grass do? The grass is very flexible. It'll bend.
It just goes with where the wind is.
Right.
Yes.
And I think what's cool about this type of a business structure or business model is it allows you to be very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And in a very busy, good season, you have the ability to scale up.
Mm-hmm.
And in a really bad, difficult season, you can get lean
Mm-hmm.
almost overnight and very easily.
Yeah.
And so it's been cool because I feel like even our business experienced so many highs and lows.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like big order, really busy, need a ton of help. And then like 6 months later, it'd be like, dude, we have no work. We're going to just like make up things for everybody to do. We'll build stuff and try to sell it later. And it was very much like a roller coaster. I think part of that is it's early years in business or like that.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to have a business model where in those slow seasons where you're not getting as much work, you aren't being drowned by that overhead.
Yeah, because that
is
75
really nice.
becomes real.
Yeah, it does.
Very quick.
Because you can do great 9 months out of the year, those 3 slow months.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, you have the overhead and you're not bringing in the income like you'd like, that's where you lose it,
And then
and you
these
just
people
break
are
even at the end.
Yeah, these people are dependent. You start graying and you're just like,
Dude,
what is it
graying
that
for
we
sure.
do? I think there's a beauty in how God allows us to struggle
Yep.
and have those seasons to get us to a place to where we start to think differently about what we've been given. Because had that not happened to you, you're like, I mean, I'm probably going to just end up getting more people and your business would have looked great.
Yeah.
You would have been miserable,
Yep.
but your business would have looked great. Ultimately, that's not sustainable. It's not scalable for you.
You're right.
You would have flamed out. Something
Yeah.
would have happened. You would have burned out and it'd have
You're
been
right.
like, what happened to Tony? We never knew. But you, in that moment, in that wrestling with God, you're just like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, we got to do something different.
Yeah.
Model changes. We're back in a position of scalability again.
Yeah.
And we're still working with a lot of people, but in a different way that really accounts for like, okay, where are we trying to go? Your personal happiness, your family's health, and even the contractors who you work with. Like, I'm pretty sure they're a lot more happy at this point to be able to work like that than to be worried about like,
it's almost like
am I gonna have a job?
Dude, I think about it with church models. Sometimes in church you'll see where like I've seen it done both ways. It's been done right and been done wrong. Where you'll have the church leader at the top, and as the church is growing and as people underneath are ready to flap their own wings and start something, I've seen the church models where they support that. And they send people out and they expand it, and it's like, it's beautiful, it's kingdom, it's great.
Yep.
And then I've seen the other half where it's like, it feels like that's your competition and you don't want them leaving the church, and you definitely don't want them taking your people from your church to their church. And it just it can get nasty. And I feel like what's been cool with this is like I think about like one of our lead builders now has his own business.
Wow.
Because in our transition was actually really beautiful. I say like we went from 15 employees to none. It wasn't like, it was like one day we were like, hey, everybody,
So you're no longer W-2. Here, sign this 1099.
Yeah, right.
What is
Make
this?
sure I get this taxes to you. No, it actually worked out really beautifully. I'd say 95% of it went super smooth. It was very natural. People were either already in a season where they needed to transition, so we just didn't refill those roles.
Okay.
Or we launched people into a new opportunity where now they're their own business and they can take some of this team with them to help run it, and we'll feed you guys a ton of work,
Wow.
So
So your
it's-
business launched businesses.
Yeah, it's cool.
Essentially, you did church planning of the business
Kind of
world.
like business planting, huh?
That's
right.
It's amazing that concept is not exclusive to God's plan for the church.
Interesting, huh?
But
That
it's
is so
very
interesting.
much which is why like God is so principled. He's like, look, I'm setting this up and it's going to seed time and harvest. Like this is going to happen the same way all the time. And that could even happen in your business where you come in and you're thinking you're going to like have all of this. And God is like, no, actually, I need you to empower these people to go and have their own business, but you'll still be connected, but everyone's fine and they have their own thing. And it's interesting to see.
That's a really cool parallel. I've never really considered that. I love that idea of business planting. Like that seems, I need to jot that down.
Listen,
on that.
people need it. It's one of the reasons why I think Ryan's programs do so well is because, and not just his, but there's others that do the same, have kind of the same model. People don't know what they don't know. They know where they want to go. They know, like, I have an idea and I want to launch a business, and that's great. But just like for you, that season of that container sitting in front of your parents' home for 9 months, where your dad says, okay, let me show you, let me connect you with these people. And then you get to kind of like figure the rest out. And, oh, I have another connection with Chris. Let him come over here and let him do these finishes. And then let's partner on some of these things. Like, that was key.
Yeah.
Doing that by yourself. I don't know if you're here, or I'm sure God's going to get you to where you need to get to, but how you got there, like, that was a key moment. And so in business, even for myself, I'm like, I started a business and I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then I start working for Ryan, and I'm like, oh, this is what the grind looks like. Yeah. I wasn't even doing like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what you do on a daily basis. But after being in the environment, now I'm just kind of like, this is just a daily thing. And I learned that. And so we do the same thing in all of our learning systems. That's really cool. And so, like, I'm not pushing you to start learning systems, but you have a unique perspective and skill set to be able to help people scale in a way that everyone can't help them do. Yeah,
it's cool. That's good feedback, bro. And I've felt very passionate about business. It's weird because it's like different seasons of life. Like, you would relate. Like in your 20s, you're super passionate about different things. 30s, it just changes. And I would say, like, the last 7 years, I've been so passionate about business and almost like how in my season of apologetics, it's almost like you're trying to figure out and understand more about God.
Right.
And I feel like this last season has been trying to figure out and understand more about business. And it's one thing to, like, read a book and parrot something, which there is so many good books that you want to read and learn from. But there is something to, like, getting your hands dirty and getting in the trenches and truly applying it and seeing what happens.
Right.
And it's like, it's been interesting, but I feel like the last probably 24 months has finally felt like a little bit of a breakthrough, where I'm finally like, oh my gosh, like, dude, it was a grind. Like, it was a grind, man. Like, I feel like I had worked so hard, and it felt like at the end of the year it would just be break even. Like, so hard, and COVID. Like, I mean, things that would, like, really impact your business.
Yeah.
And it just felt like, man, we're not getting there. And ultimately, I was doing the same thing year in and year out over and over again and getting the same result, right? I was. And so it wasn't until I was able to try something different that, at least in the context of what I was doing, was enough to be like, oh, this just makes more sense,
I like that you said try something different, but you didn't say stop doing what I'm doing. And I think a lot of business owners do that. They have an idea and it's a good idea, and then they're working it and it doesn't work the way that they want it. And so then it's like, oh, this business idea doesn't work.
Wow.
So let me go do something else. And it's
Nailed
like,
it.
no. Your business idea works, just not this way.
That crazy, bro. That gives me the chills.
Don't quit your business. Just quit the model in which your business is this model is not scalable for you.
Yeah.
So find something else, a different way of scaling your business, but stick to what's yours. Like, you don't need to, like, I couldn't imagine being like, you know what? Tiny homes isn't it.
Yeah.
Going back to doing architecture. It's like, what? Why? It's like, I know that works, but my business just failed.
Yeah.
Who told you? Like, what? How did you equate needing to restructure to I just failed? You just needed to struggle.
It's a struggle. You're right, man.
With the idea of doing something different.
Yeah.
But once you found it, you're like, oh, we can breathe.
Yeah.
Let's just keep doing this, which birthed other businesses. So, I mean, I'm not telling you that you need to do some consulting, and not even necessarily, I don't even know if it's necessarily just like in your field.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that of like, I need to do something different.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I have to do a different business. I just need to do something different within what I'm doing. And I think you have a lot to offer there.
You know, it's encouraging to hear you say that. I was driving home from my parents' house. They live in Utah now, back to Vegas. This was like probably like a month ago. And my wife was listening to a book. She had her headphones in. My son's asleep in the back for 3 hours. It was a miracle. And I'm driving, and you probably experience when you're driving, you're thinking, you know? And I was just trying to think about the whole history of like the journey up till now. And there was these two phrases that hit me that I was like, man, if I could encourage someone that feels like they're stuck, like I definitely had felt like I was stuck. The two things that came to mind that helped me were get lean and get leverage. So I really feel like if you're in that season, you know, it's almost like if you were to ask, you know, someone that does like financial planning, right? They're like, well, if you're spending more than you're making, you know, you need to get rid of stuff.
Right.
And I think that's getting lean. Like if your business is losing more money than it's making, you have to get leaner.
Yeah.
There's no choice. Like you can't just keep trying to do it and hope for something better to happen. Like you literally need to get leaner. And for us, getting leaner meant like, how do we get out of this hefty overhead? You know, I think different businesses, it's different things, but a lot of businesses can get creative with how they can get lean. And then get leverage would be, well, what are the things in your business that require the least amount of effort that's going to produce the greatest amount of result? And so for us, that's what happened. When I scaled down to a business of one, all of a sudden, instead of having, you know, 600 hours of man hours in a week to move forward the business, it's now 40 hours. Well, I have to figure out what is the most important thing to do in 40 hours to make this business move forward, because that's all I have. Like I can't build for 29 hours a week, you know? So I have to literally outsource 100% of the building. And from there, you start to figure out, well, then what are those things that have the highest leverage? Well, being a builder wasn't the thing that had the highest leverage. What I started to recognize is, and I'll name drop him, Myron Golden. You maybe have heard of him.
No,
dude, he's amazing. You should get him on here actually.
Myron Golden.
He's a believer, yeah.
Okay, is he in town?
He is in Florida,
He's
Tampa.
in Florida. Okay,
I'm sure they'll be here though.
Connect me and we'll figure something out.
Omar is connected really close with him.
Okay, we'll talk after. We'll do it.
If I'm honest, there's been two big voices. Him and Graham Cochran's another Christian dude that I'd recommend.
Okay,
he's also in Tampa, so. But
Ryan, we're going to Florida. We're going to Florida, Ryan.
But dude, both these guys have like helped me a lot in my business walk this last 2 years. And Myron specifically, dude, man, guru might be like an understatement. I'm like, the dude is on it with everything he's been saying. And he's an older guy. Like he's been through it. He definitely was not an overnight success, like a 40-year in the making success.
Wow.
And, you know, he talks a lot about like where you have the most leverage. He said at the bottom is implementer. As an implementer, you are a doer. As a doer, you have, in a lot of ways, the least amount of leverage. You're usually paid simply for your time. You trade time for money. So you're going to get $25 an hour to do A, B, and C.
Right.
You know, above that is you have unification, which is a manager. A manager is going to make more money because they're able to manage, you know, 20 people that are doers.
Right.
Above that, you have sales, which I've noticed as I've scaled back my business. I notice that when I'm in the sales seat, like, wow, I have plenty of opportunity to do well in business, because being in the sales seat, now you're getting the income. You just have to fulfill it and find someone that can fulfill it. Right. So that's really good. But what Myron says is at the very top is ultimately the visionary or the innovator, the person that can think of new things that don't exist yet. It is how you can really ultimately do the best in business. Wow. So that's why like someone like a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk or these people that are creating things that everyone wasn't even thinking about are the wealthiest people, because they're innovators at the end of the day. And so he has so many cool frameworks like that it really helped me when I was trying to understand what parts of the business can I delegate and outsource, and what parts of the business do I want to stay in that seat. And ultimately where I'm at now is the manufacturing's all outsourced. The sales is outsourced. The marketing is, I'm getting more and more out of that seat. I naturally love marketing, but I'm working my way out and have someone else that's doing the marketing. Okay. And I'm currently doing a lot of the project management. I'm getting out of that seat. Someone else is coming in to take that. So that the goal is that I can try to move up into the innovator seat, which is basically this, where I'm going to say, what are new products that we can develop that I think our audience is asking for that don't already exist?
Wow.
So that's where you want to get to. You want your time to be in that seat, because as the innovator, that's the best seat for you as a business owner. So, and that's a Myron Golden framework. That helped me a lot.
Look,
in
I'm
this,
like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Say that one more time. Okay.
Dude, he's
let me
good,
write
man.
that down. That's good. I think that is so amazing.
Yeah, it really was a good framework. It really
Yeah.
helped me a lot.
And it's good to hear that, because you said something that's you've introduced me to two people in the last 5 minutes that I've never heard of.
Yeah.
That have been in business, and they're Christians.
Yeah, awesome Christians too.
And what they're saying and what they're teaching, it works, it's scalable, it's proven. And I think a lot of times we really, really, really don't have a heavy enough, we're not vocal enough about, there are very sharp Christian business leaders out there.
Yeah,
and
sure.
They're everywhere, and we don't know about them. And that's part of what we want to do at Wealthy Kingdom, is start to highlight this, because you would think the only place that God is moving, like I hear people say like, man, and it's not a bad thing to quote. They're like, man, Billy Graham said that there's going to be a great revival in the marketplace and we're waiting for it. And I'm like, what are you waiting for? It's happening.
Totally.
There are people out here who are already doing it. You're just not aware enough of the revival that's around you. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think they mean well.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, the more I'm around more entrepreneurs, the more I'm around business leaders, and I'm hearing about, like, man, who are you listening to? Who are you talking to? Oh yeah, this Christian thought thinker, this Christian business leader. And you're like, we are influencing the business world a lot more than people really think.
Yeah.
It's encouraging, it's beautiful, and it's great to know that, like, God is not just now thinking of this idea of like, oh, we should influence the marketplace.
Right.
Like, oh, there's people who need that. Like, it's already happening. And I feel like, you and I and others are that next coming of the next wave of people who will, 15, 20 years from now, will be like, listen, let me tell you something.
It's crazy.
This is what you need to do when you're doing it. Because at some point when he's not here, you have that framework. You're
right.
you're building that framework. You're making it your own. And then someday someone's going to need to hear you say that and be like, oh yeah, I got this from someone.
You're right.
And I'm going to teach it to you. And it just continues to go. And someone will be sitting in the same seat we're in, and they'll be like, have you heard Tony Lopez? Listen, he gave me this. And you'll be like, yeah, and I got this from a guy.
Right? And it's the power of principles, huh? Like Myron, he always references them as principles. Like, these are principles I've discovered over time. And principles don't change. They're timeless. So if they work, they work, whether you're here or there. And it's so true that you can take something like that and it can translate into any business. It really applies.
Yeah. And you don't have to be, I can listen to what you're saying, and I'm never going to do tiny homes.
Yeah.
But I can take the principle of what you're doing and how you're elevating and scaling your business, and I can say, oh, wow, I can do that in Wealthy Kingdom. I can do that in leadership coaching and development, and that becomes my thing. And I'm like, okay, if I had to start a business today, I don't have to go have 100 employees.
No. What's crazy, and this is where, so Myron helped me a lot to understand leverage. What areas of business do you get the most leverage? And there's other things that he shares that are really good. But Graham Cochran is the one that helped me understand that you can have a really successful one-person business. So he has a one-person business that probably does about $3 million a year.
Wow.
As a one-person business, which is really cool. And that's like that's not just like revenue and expenses were like 2.9 million. You know what I mean? Like he's probably keeping 80 to 90% of that.
Wow.
And so he gave me a framework of what it could look like to be a solopreneur, and what that would look like as a business of one. And then my buddy from college, dude, sure enough, he became him and his wife, a 7-figure entrepreneur of a business of one. It's just, or two, it's him and his wife.
Wow.
And they work like 5 to 10 hours a week. And It's crazy. Yeah, I know.
Say more.
Yeah, right. What does he do? That's another episode. I'm not gonna tell you. No,
I just told everybody not to quit the job that you're doing, but now I'm like, tell me what they do so we can do that.
So what both of these people do at the end of the day, one of the most scalable things is online digital content, right? So it's a lot of things that a lot of people are doing, but ultimately they're creating a lot of good content online. They're driving it back to some kind of offer. And the offer is, the key is with leverage, make it all automated, right? So like, DM the word,
boom,
this,
and then it goes
you're
here.
going to get our automated webinar.
Right.
Then you're going to hit the automated sales page, and we're going to give you a valuable offer. It's going to be 10x whatever you're paying for it, right? Like you're going to get a lot of value, but it's digital, so it didn't take me anything to fulfill it. Like someone orders a tiny home, oh my gosh, it takes so much to fulfill it. My phone's going off right now. We have an A-frame traveling 2,000 miles to North Carolina right now. It's oversized load, it's 12 foot. I don't know what's happening, right?
She's like, it's on the road.
Oh my gosh.
I hope it's there.
I don't even want to look at my phone. and that's physical goods, especially big physical goods. You have those challenges. Dude, digital products. Oh my gosh. If I was 19 years old, I would be thinking, how can I scale through digital products? So content creation leading to a digital good. Like that's a good framework, but also if you're 19, you still want to develop skill sets.
Yeah.
So get underneath someone, learn, and then you have something to offer too.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm like, the 19-year-old who scaled $1 million.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm ready to listen to you.
Yeah, I don't like that either.
I think you're good at what you're doing. I'm just not ready to listen. If you're 19 and you scaled to $1 million, we still want to talk to you, but we're gonna have to talk about some other things too along the way, because
there's exceptions, but the norm would be not
the 19-year-old.
That's funny.
Man, thank you.
Right on. Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
This was great.
I really enjoyed it.
This
Chris.
was a great
man.
conversation. Your story is amazing.
Thank you, dude.
You've been through a lot.
It's been a journey.
Following that journey, I'm like, okay. Like that was refreshing to hear. I appreciate you coming on.
Dude. Well, thank you for piecing things together and even giving me a new perspective on that story, man. You a lot of good. I'm gonna have to re-listen to this just to hear the things you said and take some notes.
Look. I'm like, okay, what did we? Don't worry, it'll be on the podcast. We'll be able to go back and listen. I do appreciate you coming in and doing this with us. This won't be the last time. We'll definitely have to have you back, because who knows what's gonna happen. I'll be like, Tony, how are you, Chris? I'm in the visionary still out right now, and life is different. And so, okay, we're gonna have to have him back so we can talk about what it's like there.
That'd be cool.
But for all of you who are listening, if you're watching, thank you for tuning in. Again, this is Tony Lopez, alternativeliving.com.
Alternativeliving.spaces.com.
Alternativeliving.spaces.com. If you want to check out what he's doing, make sure you follow him on social media. If you're looking for a tiny home, if you're looking for something a little different, office space, whatever it may be, I don't even know, reach out to him so that potentially this might be, the next place where you need to stop at. I hope that you guys, again, subscribe to this Wealthy Kingdom. We want to bring you the best of the best in Christian entrepreneurship and business leading. So until we connect on the next episode, I hope God keeps you and God blesses you in everything that you're doing. And we'll catch you on the next podcast. Peace.